And we'll try it again. Call the meeting of JEDO to order. If we could have Madam Clerk, our first item.
Roll call.
Let's do that.
Commissioner Bueller. Present. Commissioner Cook.
Present.
Commissioner Archer.
Here.
Mayor De La Isla. Deputy Mayor Jensen.
Present.
Councilmember Padilla.
Present.
Councilmember Lesser.
Here.
Councilmember Hiller. Here. Councilmember Clear. Councilmember Ortiz. Councilmember Emerson. Councilmember Mays.
Here.
Councilmember Cohen.
Here.
All right. If we could, let's start with the first item.
Item 3, action item, approval of September 12th, 2018 JEDO Board meeting minutes.
Are there any comments or questions regarding the September 12th, 2018 JEDO Board meeting minutes?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Archer, second by Councilmember Lesser. Are there any further comments on this item? There are no public comments signed up. This time, if we could take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bueller. Aye. Commissioner Cook.
Aye.
Commissioner Archer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Jensen.
Aye.
Councilmember Padilla.
Aye.
Councilmember Lesser.
Aye.
Passes. Our next item.
Item 4, action item, consider recommendation by the JEDO Finance Committee to award bid for JEDO 2018 audit services.
Good evening. I am the current treasurer for the JEDO Finance Committee, and we issued an RFP, a request for proposal, for the JEDO audit. The bid was for 3 years, beginning in 2018, with the right to extend the engagement for 2 additional one-year periods. We received 3 bids and 2 no-bid letters, just stating that they would not be submitting a bid. All 3 bidders were qualified firms. The JEDO Finance Committee met and reviewed the bids. The JEDO Finance Committee consists of the Shawnee County Public Works Director, the Topeka Public Works Director, Shawnee County Financial Administrator, and then the City Manager Designee, which is the City Finance Director. 2 firms tied for the lowest bid at $5,800, one of those being our current auditor. The other bid was 38% more at $8,000 for the first year. Years 2 and 3 will have approximately 3% increase a year. The committee discussed the benefits of changing auditors after a certain number of years, to have fresh eyes, a different perspective, and just to show the public that we are looking at all those things that should be looked at. Therefore, the committee is recommending that the board award the bid to Summers, Spencer and Company. If this is awarded to them, we will then come back to the board at the February meeting for you to approve the engagement letter. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Greiner regarding this item? Seeing no questions, is there a motion on this item?
Move to approve. Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Archer to approve, awarding the bid to Summers, Spencer and Company. Second by Councilmember Lesser. There are, again, no public comments signed up for this item. If we could do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bueller. Aye. Commissioner Cook.
Aye.
Commissioner Archer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Jensen.
Aye.
Councilmember Padilla.
Aye.
Councilmember Lesser.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you very much. Item number 5.
Item 5, action item, approval of funding for Project Purple.
Okay, good evening. First off, I want to kick off the meeting just by recognizing that this is Commissioner Bueller's last JEDO meeting. So we were thinking about that as we were preparing for tonight, and I think it's also a special day for her as well. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Molly.
And with with that, we also have a funding approval request before you this evening. This is for an existing business located in the Topeka and Shawnee County community. This existing company is planning to add at least 220 new jobs with an average wage of $52,000 a year. This results in an annual economic impact of $48.5 million, and that's each year. Because of those wages and the type of jobs being added, this project is estimated to create an additional 163 jobs indirectly. So before you on the screen, you have the breakdown of the incentives that we are recommending, and that is $5,500 per new job, up to 220 new jobs for a total of 1.2 for the jobs incentive, $1,000 per new employee for training, up to 220 new employees at $220,000, for a total proposed incentive of $1,430,000. And as always, these incentives are performance-based and would be audited on an annual basis. So with that, I would stand for any questions regarding Project Purple.
Any questions for Molly regarding Project Purple? After tonight's action, then this would go back, again, for the benefit of those watching as well as those present, this would then go back to Topeka to discuss with Project Purple and moving forward with a public announcement and further action by JEDO, correct?
Correct. The plan is to have an agreement before this body with an announcement of the company at the February meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Jensen, second by Commissioner Bueller. If we could have the roll call vote. And I should say there is no public comment signed up for this item.
Commissioner Bueller?
Aye.
Commissioner Cook?
Aye.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Aye.
Councilmember Padilla?
Aye.
Councilmember Lesser?
Aye.
Passes. Item number 6.
Item 6, presentation, Go Topeka quarterly report.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Keith Ward. I'm the chair of Go Topeka. I want to start things off by thanking you for your service to our community. I also want to thank you for partnering with Go Topeka to create a new community strategy, a strategy that recognizes that economic development is more than just business attraction, but it's quality of place, it's workforce development, it's all about our image improvement. It's a lot of different things. So thank you for your part in that. I also want you to know that Go Topeka is governed by an active board of directors and an executive committee filled with community leaders. This group is passionate about making our community better, which I think we all can agree is the root of economic development. Our board understands that we are accountable to you and our community, and we work to provide a high degree of transparency. Our directors hope to have an even closer relationship with JEDO, with the JEDO members, in order to provide more communication and understanding between the two entities and relate to moving our community forward. Our boards will be conducting a retreat on January 7th to gain consensus on some important business attraction items, things like industry targets and incentives, and I'd like to invite each of you to attend that, and certainly you can get details from Molly if you're interested in it. Finally, I want you to make sure that you realize that the Go Topeka staff is one that is of very high quality. It's nationally recognized, and I'm sure you all appreciate the work that they do. I certainly do. So I want to thank publicly Molly and Matt and the rest of the Go Topeka staff. They're doing an amazing job. So with that, I'll yield the floor to Molly.
I picked a squeaky chair tonight, so I apologize for that. All right, well, usually at these meetings, you see each of myself and my coworkers stand up and give you a report of what's gone on in the last quarter. Tonight, because of how action-packed the agenda is, as much as I'd like to invite each of my coworkers to come up and brief you on the highlights of the third quarter and take 45 minutes of your time about items that were over 3 months ago, we're going to truncate this report, and I will cover the highlights of each of the initiatives that are covered within JEDO's realm. So I'll start off with EMBD. And the Small Business Boot Camp is something that was a project for EMBD in the third quarter. Some of the initiatives that they have taken care of under that program in the boot camp is an 8-hour intensive boot camp for small businesses that focuses on startup and all of the components that come together when you're starting a business. They also celebrated a combined graduation for 46 fast track participants, and that's the class that educates people that are wanting to start a business on the steps to go through to make that happen and make that a reality. Of those graduates, 23 have started businesses. Most of the new starts have also participated in our incentive program. Staff is conducting research and site visits for a potential commercial kitchen in 2019. Staff is also working in collaboration with the Momentum 2022 Economic Development Work Group to develop a complete offering of incentives to businesses at all stages of growth. That will be discussed further at the retreat that Keith mentioned. Moving on to workforce development. The SODO Ride to Work program has now provided over 7,668 trips to date, with over 1,011 rides in October alone. Since inception, we've assisted almost 300 participants in the Topeka Rescue Mission Career Readiness Education Program, providing workforce training and reentry into work with bus access to internships and employment opportunities. Included the new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, hosted over 60 attendees yesterday, hearing from Michael Gonzalez, the co-founder of the Diversity and Inclusion Consortium. As former corporate leader of Diversity and Inclusion for Hallmark, Michael shared, D&I isn't in everyone's DNA. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. But those people for whom it doesn't come naturally, you have to have this constant infusion to sustain this thing that we call diversity and inclusion. And I think that quote is very timely and relevant for our community at this time. It wasn't too long ago that this initiative was started, so to keep that top of mind is very important for our community. Moving along to Cradle Through Career, which is the Together Topeka program. In Q3, we hired Diane Faflick. She has spent a lot of time listening and laying groundwork for the collective impact program that impacts the Cradle Through Career program called Together Topeka. Other initiatives that fall within this scope are the Kansas Children's Discovery Center's collaboration with school districts. They hosted Discovery Kindergarten, which was an event designed to connect kids and caregivers to community resources to get ready for school. Visit Topeka, in partnership with Shawnee County Parks and Rec, hosted camp experiences for students who traveled the city and discovered how to become community advocates. Topeka USD 501 held the ribbon cutting for the new TCALC Center. And the United Way of Topeka and its partners received the 2018 National Pacesetter Award from the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading. What I realized as I was prepping my comments for this evening is I was so focused on what everyone else wanted me to cover that I didn't devote a slide to the things that I was focusing on. So I realized that we needed to cover new and existing business, and so I'll brief you on that. We currently have 31 active projects in the pipeline for new business. Are expecting word any day from a prospect that we have been courting since early August. I met with over 60 site consultants in Q3 to bring in a total of 6 new projects. On this roller coaster of new business attraction, we were taken very swiftly up the hill for the potential of attracting a U.S. headquarters with over 500 new jobs, and presented to the site selector only to find out that we were eliminated due to concerns regarding lack of population growth. Also, in conjunction with the Momentum 2022 Economic Development Work Group, we are reviewing the incentive guidelines to bring to the board retreat in January. We have been hard at work recruiting a replacement for Jackie Steele. However, Jackie is still working on contract to continue to administer and coordinate the incentive audits to support payout agreements. And I'm excited to announce that just this morning, we received word that the candidate we selected to help fill the role Jackie played with existing business has accepted an offer and will be starting in late January once she moves back to Topeka from Dallas. So we've got a boomerang coming on to staff with Go Topeka. So that is all I have for our quarterly report. However, you've got the full report in your packet, and I would stand for any questions, and obviously the whole team is here to answer anything specific if you have anything.
Molly, again, for the benefit of those watching at home as well as those publicly present, the full quarterly report is available not just to the members, but if the public wanted to hear or read the quarterly report, how would they do so?
So the quarterly report is posted on the JEDO website, which is jedoecodevo.com. We also send out a management report to the members of the JEDO board, and if anyone in the public or members of the community is interested in receiving that, you can let me know as well.
Are there any questions for Molly regarding the third quarter for Go Topeka? All right. Seeing nothing. Thank you very much. Our next item.
Item 7, action item, quality of place project funding.
All right. Good evening. My name is Kurt Kuda, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about the quality of place funding effort that started last year at this meeting. If you recall, at that time, maybe the next slide will take us there. Hit the arrow. Maybe not. There we go. All right. Too much stuff there. Last year at this time, when the carryover funds were being discussed and approved, there was an amount in parentheses and italicized for $2 million that had quality of place labeled on that. And that was just more of a conversation starter. And the conversations from that meeting then went on to different groups, back to this group a few times. And then in May of last year, this group passed a resolution on criteria that would have to be met in whole or in part for some of the carryover funds to be applied to some quality of place projects. After that was approved, the next question was, now what? How do we do this? And just to quickly go through the process from there, the Quality of Place Work Group, that's part of Momentum 2022, one that I'm a member of, was asked to provide a panel to go through the process of considering some quality of place projects. And so after we went through some of the logistics on who would make up that panel and then how it might work, we came to the three bodies, the City Council, the County Commission, and this group in early September to say, I think we're ready to go with this, with the intent and target date of being able to bring some recommendations to this group for consideration tonight. So we're on schedule. With that, there we go. I want to talk a little bit about the process. The panel was made up of myself and 5 other members of our Quality of Place Work Group. We made sure that that panel consisted of people that were not on staff for the Greater Topeka Partnership. They were not employed by the city, the county, or other government agencies. And I was the only member of the Go Topeka board that was on that. Otherwise, it was truly a private citizen panel. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that we had that element involved in the process. We accepted applications through the October 22nd. We had a shorter date on that, and by the recommendation or request of this board, we extended that out a couple weeks. And then over the course of 2 days, October 26th and 29th, the panel met with the applicants. A few things about that. We received 16 applications. You all received in your initial packet a listing, a quick summary of all those applications. I think the resolution's in that packet as well. 15 of those applications were forwarded to us, and we met individually with all those interested parties. The presentations that were heard, I wanted to say this, they all had merits for consideration. And everybody that came in all certainly had a passion for what their projects were. And it certainly made the process interesting and challenging at times. But most certainly it was energizing to see the passion and the interest that these various entities had with their projects and moving not only their projects forward, but how they fit in with their overall effort of our community. So within this process, we said, well, with this many applications, how do we get through this and try to make sure that we slice and dice it appropriately and make the best decisions as we could to provide recommendations. So we took the resolution criteria. We actually set up a scorecard to give us an objective look at it. And then from there, we took a look at that. We really put premium on several of the things that are listed on here. First of all, we wanted to make sure that these were projects and not programming. We wanted to make sure they applied to quality of place, not quality of life. There is a nuance and a significant difference to that. We also felt it was very important that these projects were going to be done in a short amount of time. And short amount of time is what we defined was 12 to 18 months, with a lean more towards that 12 months. To capitalize on the term momentum, we wanted to see these done and online
and being enjoyed by our community within a short amount of time to continue the momentum. We also put premium on shared funding sources with a lot of private dollars really being the premium to that. We did not feel that this should be a sole source of funding to it. So again, we had $2 million we felt to work with, 16 projects overall. The total request was somewhere just short of $10 million. Not everything was going to get funded, right? So we had to go through a process of determining what we would recommend. So we recommended 4 projects, and just a little bit more about the process before we get to those. On the 29th, after we considered everything, we did a dry run on where everything landed. We did a bit of a run-through on that, and then we presented that to the GO-TOPEKA Executive Committee to run it through that process. And the Executive Committee that morning asked a lot of questions, had a few challenging questions for us, asked us to better explain how we got there, but in the end, they approved the recommendation to be moved on then to the GO-TOPEKA Board for further approval, if you will, on the recommendations to bring to this body. The GO-TOPEKA Board met on December 7th, and so when we provided the information to you all last Wednesday, it hadn't been approved yet, and so we didn't have everything. It was still, I guess, in draft form. So tonight, what you're seeing on the slide provide a little more detail than what we were able to provide last Wednesday, since it hadn't gone all the way through. That was interesting. All right, now on to what we're recommending. The first award that we are recommending is to the Jayhawk Theater. They had 2 requests, as you can see on the list, and this recommendation is a partial funding for one of their requests. And in specific, it is to provide them a hookup to the city sewer and water. This completes a project they had already started. They had already started some remodel on their facility. They've remodeled and improved their restroom facilities. However, when they went to go to try to bring them online, they were not hooked up. And so as they have ongoing programming going on there at the Jayhawk Theater, the people that are going there to enjoy that are having to go elsewhere for their needs. And so what we felt is that providing this award, this is the amount they estimated in order to get that hookup, it would help them with their existing programming, as well as they're ready to kick off a major capital campaign in the second quarter of next year. It should enhance their ability to raise funds through that effort. This could be done very quickly, be done, I guess it's really going to be dependent upon weather more than anything, but be done by the second quarter. Second item we're recommending is partial funding for NOTO. They are in the midst of a $2.1 million capital campaign. They've already collected some funds with that, so this would be participating in that campaign. Their request really involved 3 different things. One was the Redbud Park. The second was to acquire some property for parking, since they have some parking issues for their existing programming. And the third was for some general district improvements. Their capital campaign also includes a part of their overall campaign is for their overall center, the NOTO Center. That wasn't involved with their request. What we're recommending here is partial funding of their request. This closes a gap in funding for some of these items, and they will be completed in the second quarter of 2019. In specific, what we're recommending is funding the parking space acquisition, and that could be done very quickly. The other part goes to Redbud Park. They already have $400,000 raised for that park. Part of this award would go to, or I think it might have that the other way around. I think they have 500 raised and the 400 will go to Redbud Park. That will come on during the spring of this next year to help with their ongoing programming and events down there, with a small balance going to some general district improvements, which would include some signage and some lights. So this is a small part of that. Project number 3 is the Downtown Plaza. This again is a partial funding of their whole request that they brought in. You're all aware of this project. Really, this award is one of the final parts of their overall funding sources, if you will, in their funding effort. So they've raised funds through various means, mostly all private funds. This would really be the final gap on this. I'm told that they are ready to start right away, and with a target completion date of December of next year, ideally, if not the early part of 2020. They already have funding sources identified for the programming piece as well as the upkeep. And I guess that's another part that we certainly ask questions on in all these projects is if it gets done, what's going to make sure it looks nice 2 years from now and not be left for the elements to determine how they look like. And they've already got those funding sources identified. So this would be a $1.25 million award for the downtown plaza. The number 4 is an exercise park project in Auburn for $53,000. This is purely for the cost of equipment. So this would be very similar to the exercise park that's in the High Crest neighborhood. They've identified the location right by their city offices. They've identified the cost and the methods to install the equipment, to maintain it, to make sure that it's secure and that there's security around that. Just as a side note, the city of Auburn does not get any county park and rec funds, so this is really some of the funding that would go to them. So they don't have access to that. So this is one that could go on right away. The representative that came said we would start yesterday if we had the chance. So this is one that would certainly have a high velocity rate to bring it on board. So overall, there's 4 projects that we felt fit quality of place. I will say all the projects, as we went through kind of the criteria, they didn't hit every box. There wasn't a in-whole project, but all of these that we recommended certainly fit most of those criteria. This does fill out the whole $2 million that was at least roughly put out there for us. And again, 3 of these projects should be done in the first half of the year. I think that's my last slide. So with that, I'm assuming that there will be questions.
Questions for Mr. Kuda regarding quality of place and the process and the recommendations?
Are we going to have public hearing
Well,
first?
okay, you can do public comment first, so Kurt, we'll come back to you.
Okay.
All right.
So you're telling me don't get too comfortable?
All right.
All right.
We do have 7 members of the public that have signed up to speak. The first is Pat Michaelis.
Good evening. I'm Pat Michaelis. I am chairman of the Downtown Topeka Foundation. I live at 709 South Kansas, and I could say a lot of things. I really just, if you have questions, I'd rather address things that you're thinking about than, it seems to me like we've covered, the details of the plaza. I would just say this. I think this is a business decision. Where do you get the most bang for your buck? Where does the community get the best return? And I would submit that the plaza is going to be right at the top of that list. But other than that, I'm interested in what you'd like me to talk about.
Any questions regarding Jayhawk Theater? All right. Thank you very much, Pat. Our next speaker is Kurt Young.
I will keep my comments very general. There's really most likely nothing new to be said here tonight to contribute to your decision that you have to make regarding these awards. You've heard the presentation and you followed the progress of the plaza. I'm speaking specifically regarding the plaza. You've followed the progress of this plaza effort in the media now for nearly 4 years. The roots of this dream can be traced to several different origins, but the first roots that really sprouted and produced some positive results were in 2014 and 2015 when the Topeka Lodging Association solicited the city of Topeka to set aside some transient guest tax dollars for the development of a plaza. That was accomplished. Mr. Kuda talked about operation funding. Just last year, the Topeka Lodging Association stepped forward again and instituted a tourism business improvement district that's going to generate probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $450,000 a year in funding for the operations. Add to that the most recent donations of $2.5 million each from both Evergy and Cap Fed. and we are now in the enviable position of nearing the ending of the fundraising process. Tonight, we ask that you put the capstone on this process with the award that has been recommended tonight so this project may move forward. The lodging industry representatives that are here tonight are present to witness the culmination of a dream that began, as well as other the foundation members, a lot of people have been behind this effort. In all of my years of civic involvement in Topeka, I have never seen anything that has garnered as much support and volunteer effort as this project has, and it's a tribute to the whole effort. The most appropriate way to say thank you to those folks who've labored so hard to get to this point is to grant this request. And I'll stand for any questions. And
Any questions for Mr. Young? Thank you. Our next speaker is Carl Watson.
I'm Carl Watson, representing a combination of myself and Ad Astra Fiber, my startup that's located at 712 Innovations. So first I wanted to just express my excitement about this process. So the last meeting I was here, I talked to you and shared kind of my background with my daughters and how I told them not to share their home with anyone. And then that was 10 years ago, and now we have Airbnb, that's one of the biggest hospitality companies in the world. And then I told them the same thing a few months later: don't ever let anybody in your car as you learn to drive. And of course now we have Uber, and as a older male, I'm finding out how disconnected I am with all of these new technologies. So a couple of years ago, I decided to take their advice and get into an area of high-speed internet. And I submitted 4 projects, actually, that were kind of combined in the same concept. They're all related to connectivity. And I just wanted to first express my excitement on this process. I think this is something that could really get things funded. For me as an entrepreneur, it's like, hey, this works at my speed finally. And I appreciate, the effort and the requirements that go with city funding and all of these projects. But thank you for finding a policy way to speed up some of these decisions. And I think I'd challenge you have an opportunity tonight to fund 4 terrific projects. My disappointment is, of course, I'm not included in those 4 projects. But I would encourage each of you to, if you could some way let me know, I presented a plan. The plan was to hook up 1,500 homes in the next year to high-speed internet. And those homes were in different various areas. Some were in the county, some were in affordable housing. And then tagged onto that was the ability to access and connect with thousands of tourists and visitors that would get free Wi-Fi in downtown Topeka, as well as in Nodo. And so I know a couple things about my plan. It's bigger than me. It's kind of a definition for an entrepreneur, and it needs help. And I'll share from my long history of corporate planning that there's only one thing I know about my plans for sure, which is the same things that you know about your plans for sure, and that is that they are wrong. That's the only thing I know for sure. My plan is wrong. What I'd ask tonight is participation from the community. I'm ready to hook up 1,500 homes. I know how to do it. I need help. And I'm here tonight as an entrepreneur that's out of 712 Innovations, that's crazily starting up its own business. I'd just like to put out there, I'm out there to get this done. I'm excited for the next agenda item to talk about community broadband in general and much bigger budgets. But I just wanted to say thank you for this exciting new project or process. The ability to distribute some of these funds in the way you propose just is remarkable. It's just remarkable from my point of view. And I'll reiterate, as an entrepreneur, thanks for coming to the table in a way that can speed these things along. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad. Otherwise, I'm a little surprised because I thought I wouldn't get to speak until about 8 o'clock based on previous meetings. So I hate to slow down the train. But with that, I'll conclude. Again, it's Carl Watson with Ad Astra Fiber, and I'm just excited for the process and to be here.
Any questions for Mr. Watson? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Brenda Block. see her present, followed by Kellen Seitz.
Good evening, board members. Kellen Seitz with Spectra Venue Management in the Kansas Expo Center. First off, I want to say thank you for allowing us to be here. Mr. Kuda and the rest of his representative work group team for allowing us to present our proposals on behalf of the Kansas Expo Center to the JEDO board for this exciting funding opportunity. I will say we are slightly disappointed, so the rest of the presentations must have had very good merit, and I think they all did. But I just wanted to re-encourage the group tonight to think about when you're allocating these funds on what type of impact those funding dollars have in the community. As you're aware, most of you are aware, our venue is undergoing a $32.5 million renovation over the next 20 to 24 months. And our request was to cover some of that gap funding that we currently have in between the architectural budget and what funding we currently have. So I wanted to read off a couple statistics. Based on our renovation over the next couple years, the increase in economic impact levels based on a CS&L study are due to increase about 60%. That directly correlates to over $20 million in economic impact direct spending for Shawnee County and the city of Topeka for our renovation project. So I just wanted to share that. Again, thank you for allowing us to participate in this program and this funding request. And I know you have a tough job ahead of you tonight, so I'll be quiet and let you get to work.
Any questions for Mr. Seitz? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lazone Grace.
Good evening, members of the JEDO. I sent some information to you all in advance that was rather lengthy because I knew that there would not be much I can probably express in 4 minutes. But I did try to lay out the reasoning why I thought that the project that we submitted for Central Topeka should be funded. It was not recommended for funding. And, you know, I've been worked in this community for a while, come here many years, try to make things, positive things happen. And so I can understand when there's energy, you know, that is going on, especially within the downtown, the riverfront. We have new leadership. Those terms that come with Momentum 2022 and the downtown plaza, it is very easy to get sucked into that one-sided side of thinking. But from the very beginning of the sales tax, one of the things that I try to do is think about that equity portion of it. Because left by its own device, when the sales tax first came up for economic development, no one was thinking about anything until someone had to speak up to that 10%, because normally within these decisions are being made, there's some people that are not in the room, and for whatever implicit reason, they just don't come up on the radar. And so whether these here were additional funds that hadn't been spent, I would think that you would want equity to apply to these funds just as well, instead of just one area taking all of that access and resources off of the table. And it's not just, it's not that I'm an East Topeka guy or a Central Topeka guy, I'm like a poverty guy. And so one of the things that I submitted with our proposal that I sent to you, our proposal in full, was the city's neighborhood map. So that when the opportunity presented itself to apply for these fundings, and we have been looking at the building way before this came up, I looked at the area, what was needed, and wasn't putting together a proposal because of how much money was available, but because of what I know about this city and this community and how it could be an addition to. What I did not have to share at that time were the letters of support that we have received from Doorstep, who owned the building and had been in that neighborhood for a long time. I have Sister Lassiter, she is here. Mike Bell with the Tennessee Town NIA. Now, they may not have been on the panel who were the people who would review them and make a recommendation. But these are the people who probably know what is going on and needed in their neighborhood. And it would just be, you know, disheartening to see, it's not without seeing the press and the contributions and the support that some of these downtown projects already have. And that support isn't going to go anywhere. Matt and Vince are not going to let that happen. Company executives here are not going to let that happen. And I could not stop and think of any type of funding or support that the JEDO in general did in that neighborhood. And I think that this would be a good opportunity to do such. I am here to appeal the recommendation for funding. If I would have known, if I would have known how much was available, I still would have submitted something for $90,000 because that was a large amount. But I shared with you an alternative amount that I could have submitted because I think that the necessity of programming and projects in that area is what's important. When I travel with Commissioner Bueller and Matt and Molly down to Kansas City, and we walked through the Wyandotte County, Northeast Wyandotte County Neighborhood Community Technology Center, right across the street from the oldest and largest public housing development center. That's already what I've seen that was going to happen in these communities here. So there's not a lot of time, and I would hope that those who are receiving some of the largest seats could see that it's equity in distribution of public funds. In this instance right here, should be of value to send a message that it's not just about a few organizations in one part of town. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Any questions for Lazone? Thank you. Our final speaker is Carol Marple.
Thank you very much for giving me the 4 minutes to express my thoughts. I need some handouts. I like handouts. Lazone is always a very tough act to follow. I agree with what he said. And I know many of you are probably thinking to yourself, what on earth is she up here griping about now? Because Auburn is included as one of the recipients. And I would like to thank you all for including one county recipient. I guess I would have to say on a whole, the quality of place program, for lack of a better word, I find pretty murky. I have trouble following how we got from point A to point B. I went back to the minutes of the JEDO from December 13th, 2017 to see if I had not maybe just been paying good enough attention or what. I did make copies of part of these meetings to share with you. In December of 13th, 2017, there was a mention, a question about quality of place, and behind that it said $2 million. I did not realize that was voted on. On February 28, 2018, Commissioner Cook stated, "Let us come back in May with a proposed actionable plan." May 9th, 2018, a resolution was signed for establishing a policy for use of economic development funds. Again, there was no amount. Some of the criteria for these funds were community connection. It enhances community plans and objectives. An example of this was Momentum 2022. Will there be a time that Momentum 2022 will be able to qualify for these funds? Their strategy development is funded by the Topeka Community Foundation, Go Topeka, Heartland Visiting, Topeka and Shawnee County Library, and the United Way of Greater Topeka. Will any of these organizations qualify for these funds? Would it not be a conflict of interest? Included in the resolution of JEDO's economic development was JEDO's economic development consultant, not specifically named. Who is that, and how did they receive this title? On September 12, 2018, and I do thank Mr. Kuda, and I hope I pronounced your name right, I'm sorry if I didn't, for his presentation of the Go Topeka Quarterly Report. Now, this was all stated as a done deal. We have a citizens panel, which, you know, he talked a little bit about how this happened. I just included these reports to maybe help refresh your memories. I also want to address Councilwoman Hiller's concern, which were very founded. The smaller cities of this county did not know anything about this program. I know this because I went to Auburn, Silver Lake, and Rossville and informed them about the program. I copied off what was on the website and gave it to them. I have included the minutes from the Silver Lake meeting that they could not apply for this program because of the short time frame. I want to remind each and every one of you, county commissioners, city council people, this was why you were elected, to inform the people that live in your areas about programs like this. I honestly, quite frankly, don't understand how this is all happening. The one thing that I have seen through the years with attending these JEDO meetings, and I've probably attended more of them than some of you, is that you're very quick to pass things that should be discussed for a while. I think the quality of place program should do this. I also want to say one more thing. I was doing some quick math while I was sitting there, so there's margin for error. If you give them the $2 million to spend on these programs, 5% will be returned to the county. Now, I assure you, the county people spend more than 5% in this county, and this is not fair. Thank you very much. I'll quit because my time is up.
Thank you. At this time, that is the final public comment regarding quality of place funding, item number 7. The opportunities before this board are that we could make a motion to adopt the recommendations in full. We could send it back to the quality of place for further discussion or review. We could make motions or modifications to the proposal. What is the pleasure of this board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I could ask a question before we carry on of Kurt or whoever. So what's the process if this is approved from here? How are the funds expended? What's the reporting process? If we could, I'd just like to know what the next phase of this is, provided it's approved as presented.
I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Kuda.
All right. We anticipated that question as we kind of went through the process. Since this is kind of our first time through, there's some things that we don't have all buttoned down, but one of the things we know we need to have in place after we get approval is how the funds would be controlled as far as disbursement goes. What will not happen would be that these entities just get the check and off they go. And so what we'll have to do is get proof that the costs are what they represented in the application process, and then control the disbursement to make sure the funds go to the projects as intended. If there's an overage, that's their responsibility to make sure that they cover that. If they don't have to spend as much, that comes back. That's kind of what we talked about. But those details need to be firmly documented and then reported back on that. As far as potentially other follow-up items that would go with this that we've talked about, again, that we have to lay out to make sure that it fits what your needs are, there might be some direction from you, would be then some ongoing reporting back to this group where those projects are at and their effort to get to an end. What we don't want to have, obviously, is some of these projects not come online as anticipated and drag on. So this would not be the end of the conversation. Okay?
Other questions for Mr. Kuda? Councilmember Cohen.
Mine's also kind of a generic question is, where did the $2 million get earmarked for quality of place? Where did that come from? Sure. And I'm sorry, I missed a couple meetings this year, and yeah, thank you.
Why don't I ask Mr. Pavarnik if you might come up or maybe Molly, one of the two, just to kind of help me out as we go through the process. It was a year ago this time when we had we set forth the budget for Go to Pica and identified that there was excess funds or from carryover funds that would be used for quality of place. And Molly, do you want to help answer Councilmember Cohen's question?
Yes, so that's one part of it, is the funds would come from carry forward dollars that we discussed at this meeting last year. And the amount of $2 million was what was recommended by the chair of JEDO last year, which was Mayor Wolgast. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and how is quality of place integrated into economic development? They seem to be, I mean, I don't understand their connection.
Well, I think we took that up in our February meeting, and we had speakers come in from out across the public and across the community, as well as in our May meeting when we took forth the resolution. But I see the mayor kind of maybe wanting to fill in and answer a little bit. So Mayor
Absolutely.
Delisla.
So one of the things that we have done is we have been assessing what the strategy for our community is based on the Momentum 2022 plan, which is our strategic plan for the whole community, city and county. We have earmarked quality of place and quality of life as an initiative because it feeds into everything that our constituency asked for. If you recall, there were over 2,600 applications that came in, questionnaires, indicating from our community, from all sectors of our community. We had leaders from different areas in the city all provide feedback on where they wanted us to focus our funding on. In addition to that, when we received the accreditation through the Economic Development, Molly, could you help me with the name?
The International Economic Development Council.
Thank you, which were one of few, the only one in the state of Kansas. One of the things that they were talking about is we understand that as cities are evolving, there's only going to be very few cities that are going to become attractive. Right now, economic development is equated to quality of life and quality of place because we're never going to get the workplace that we want if we're not able to provide these amenities that communities are craving for. And this is one of the things that not only did they say it, but even as I have been traveling throughout the nation, it's a really high focus. We understand that nowadays, the way that employment used to work is very different. Back in the day when somebody wanted to move somewhere, what we did was that we would look for a job, and then after we had that job with the salary and the criteria that we wanted, we would move into a community. Nowadays, it doesn't work that way. Nowadays, people are looking for the place that they want to be, where they can engage and they can connect, and then they find a job there. And that is why quality of place is so important for us. And again, it's not just something that we are saying that is important. Our community stated that it was important, and we have the trend in the nation is the same.
If I may add to that, there are three legs of the economic development stool, and there's been a shift in those three focus areas within about the past year. So those used to be business attraction, business expansion, and business retention, and small business development. Those have now all lumped into one of the new legs of the stool, plus workforce development, talent attraction and retention, and then placemaking. And that is for multiple purposes, but because we are so competitive right now, there are half of the U.S. manufacturing jobs that are open right now cannot be filled, and we need to do whatever we can to attract workers. I mentioned earlier tonight that we had a prospect that we were eliminated from that site selection process due to concerns for lack of population growth. So that ties it right back to your traditional economic development of growing jobs and investment.
I think that, Councilmember Cohen, I've been working very closely with the Youth Council that you're going to hear a little bit about later this evening, and working with these young people in our community and trying to figure out how do we keep these young people in our community, what is it that we need to do to position ourselves to be more attractive, to retain young people and young talent, and just what is it that we need to do to keep people in our community so that we don't continue to lose population growth or have a lack of population growth. Other questions regarding this item or thoughts on process from this point forward?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I have a
Bueller.
question for Matt. And all these projects have merit, no doubt. But I do have a question concerning the sales tax. And the sales tax that was passed was countywide. And so those cities of the third class do receive their portion of sales tax based on a formula. Then the city of Topeka and Shawnee County then come together in an interlocal agreement, and we pool our dollars together, and we have those list of projects, and then we also fund economic development with $5 million. So I think there's maybe some impression that the smaller cities do not receive benefit from the county sales tax, but in fact, they do receive a portion based on a formula, and that amount of money is they can do what they want to do with that money. There's no stipulation, no restrictions on that money, and I'm looking to the county councilor as well. Is that true, or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's exactly my understanding of it.
Okay.
And also, the one thing I'll mention is that the $5 million for economic development is a static number over the entire time that this tax is in place.
Right.
The growth will come at the county level and at the city level. So while the $5 million stays flat, the city and the county's portion of the economic development sales tax will grow.
I know that Commissioner Bueller, this is something that you're able to use as the mayor of Rossville 13 years ago in improvements to Rossville.
I believe there was a piece some time ago, I think those monies flow into the general fund, but then that local governing body makes those decisions on where those things are, those items, or monies are spent. Yes. Just wanted to clarify that the small cities are not left out. They are included by state statute in that formula.
While I'm up here, I'll mention the three legs of the stool that Molly mentioned. That's not something that she came up with. That was actually the International Economic Development Council actually changed the three legs of the stool. And so they changed the definition. And then the other thing is the May meeting that Commissioner Cook mentioned. It was a special meeting really to focus on to discussing quality of place and quality of life. And we actually had a representative from the International Economic Development Council present at that meeting to have that conversation. Unfortunately, I missed it because my son was graduating from Marine boot camp, but I heard it went well.
Thank you.
Mayor Della Isla.
So I was late to the picture. I don't know if you guys saw, I walked in with my daughter. We had a doctor's appointment. It went long. So sorry. First thing I did was I asked my colleague here to give me the numbers that were being approved so that I could have an idea of how the funds were being distributed. And first thing I want to say is, Lazone, I want you to hear that we all are with you. I just came back from a Smart Cities conference in which we were talking about bridging the digital divide, and your concerns are not going on deaf ears. And to all the other people that applied for this grant, I just think that it's so exciting. If we wouldn't have had any other applicants, it would have meant that there was no need for everything that we're talking about. But we had people that got excited and are still being excited, even though they did not get the funding, which should tell all of us how big of an issue this is for our communities. And I'm saying communities because it's all of us, city and county, and most importantly for the individuals that live in our community. A night like this reminds me of a day in, I think it was 2012, and Jim Renner is laughing because he knows what I'm gonna say. When the city council was sitting in this same office and we were talking about approving $5 million so that we could redevelop downtown. And people didn't understand what would happen if we invested the $5 million. We didn't know if the private sector was going to come and support it. We didn't know if downtown was going to be a project that was going to be successful. And after years, 3 years of coming here and hearing no time after the other, nobody gave up. And it wasn't until Michelle Hubbard, a young lady, probably of the age of Bryce Lipke, who's back there, and Miss Nicole Bloomquist, that's also back there, stood up in front of this body and told this body, downtown sucks. And if you don't do anything about it, we're all gonna leave. Our kids told us before 2013, that quality of life was important to them. And I think all of us are here because we're all advocating that we want our kids to not only want to stay here, but to crave to be in their community. And it is our opportunity tonight to show them and all of the people that are looking at our community that we are a new Topeka, that yes, we are going to continue the tradition, that yes, we are going to have accountability for where our money is going, but that yes, that we understand that we need to grow our population to be attractive so that we can attract not only the people, but the businesses that are going to help all the boats rise in our community. So with that, I will make a motion for approval as presented.
There's been a motion made by Mayor De La Isla to approve the request as presented.
I think there's still discussion items to be gone through, Mr. Chair.
Do a second for discussion.
Is there a second for discussion?
I'll second.
There's a second by Councilmember Jensen. Further discussion, Commissioner Archer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kurt, if I could, welcome to the ultimate no-win, no-thanks assignment.
That's a good.
I realized that when it was first propositioned, yes.
In Topeka and Shawnee County. I'm reading the resolution, and it says, a proponent of the funding of quality of place project shall present the proposed project to JEDO's economic development consultant. The consultant shall review the project and provide a report to JEDO that discusses whether the proposed project meets the funding criteria and is recommended for approval. I haven't seen any report like that. Can you help me out?
The way that is being executed is through the Go Topeka Executive Committee, the board approving the recommendations or reviewing the recommendations, and this report.
Okay. We had very, very little information, though, about the projects. A couple of other questions, if I may, Mr. Chair. Was there ever any question about the committee that met being subject to Kansas Open Meetings Act? Because you're talking about allocating tax dollars in Shawnee County.
That never came up.
Okay. That is a concern that I think should have been addressed. Were the meetings open to the public? Were they announced in advance?
No, they weren't.
Were there any discussions between JEDO members and members of the committee? And could you outline some of those discussions if there were?
The only discussions were with Commissioner Cook on the process itself, not on the projects.
Okay. Are there records of the meetings? Are there minutes of the meetings? Is there anything we can review to help us understand the process and how you got to the decisions that you made?
We did not keep minutes. We had worksheets, as I indicated, for scorecards. I don't believe we kept those for posterity's sake.
So we don't, you did a quantitative analysis, but you did not keep that and
not that I'm aware of, as far as things that would have been presented up through the process, through the Go Topeka Executive Committee and the board. There were some summary reports that look very similar to what was presented or provided into your packet.
Mr. Chair, I'm just concerned with the process that went through the lack of documentation, the lack of information. I'm reviewing the resolution, and I just wish I had more information to make a decision on these. One of the things that I'm looking at that weighs heavily on me is projects that have been approved by a public vote. And the projects that you're recommending are good projects. They're great, but they've never been voted on by the public in their support. The only two that applied and that were voted on by the public, the voters, are the Expo Center and the zoo. And that's why I have a real problem with the recommendations that you've made. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would prefer that we refer it back to the committee and review the criteria again and document the rationale for making the proposals that come forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I do note in the counselor, Mr. Crowell, was with us when we were drafting the resolution. Public vote would mean the vote of this body is a vote in public.
That is correct.
Not specifically that it had to be an item that was on the sales tax ballot question.
Well, I don't know that, I don't recall specifically us refining it down to that level. honestly.
But any vote of the quality of place dollars would have to be made by this body.
Yes. Ultimately, allocation of those funds would need to be made by JEDO, yes.
And then we would constitute then a public vote.
I don't know that that's what was intended.
All right.
Well-
I'll let you all decide what you intended when you adopted that resolution.
All right.
But, Mr. Chair, it talks about it in the past tense. The project has been approved by the public. So that would mean to me that the public, the voting public, has come down on it one way or another. That's my interpretation.
Councilmember Cohen?
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking back, and this is the money that came from the last extension from 2014. Is that right? Okay, there was a newspaper article I read that said that there was an organization called Future Forward that had a campaign slogan called Vote Roads, Vote Jobs, Vote Zoo, Vote Yes. And that received 65% of the vote during that election. So I just wanted to call that into, I'm thinking the terminology wasn't in the ballot language. That's what I'm like to point out. Thanks.
And respectfully, I know that, Commissioner Archer, you raised this point when we took up the resolution, that you're concerned. At that time, if that was in fact the limitation, only the Expo Center and the zoo would be able to qualify for quality of place. No other entities would be able to qualify if that was in fact the limitation.
Well, I just put a lot of weight on what the voters tell me, Commissioner. So, thank you.
As we all do. Are there other public, Councilmember Lesser?
Thank you. I do share a few of the same concerns that Commissioner Archer does share. I do believe in the quality of place initiative. And my interpretation is because of for lack of a better term, a little bit of the vagueness of quality of place. To me, it's got to be the best of the best, what comes forward to us. And I know this is a work in progress. This is the first time going through the process from start to finish. And probably the only hangup that I do have at this point in time is I too feel like I need a little more information on some of these projects before I can move forward and allocate the public's funds for some of these. That being said, there are a couple of the projects that were approved that just because of the nature of how many times I've dealt with them in the recent past, in a variety of different settings, I understand those projects, and I would feel comfortable voting on those. But as we do consider moving forward on this, I would ask that if we are going to do that we do individually look at these, because I cannot vote in totality for all the projects that have came forth to me tonight, and I just say that as my position.
Councilmember Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to follow up on a couple things. Mr. Kuda, if I could ask, I'm familiar with the process. I think you gave us a good thumbnail of the steps that you went through. You mentioned a scorecard. How is that scorecard developed, and can I ask what's on it? I mean, what's given what weight? If that helped you decide in the recommendations.
Well, we went back to the resolution that this group passed. And each of the resolution items were given a line item and a grade, and with a weight score, I believe, of either 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. It's one of those two. And then with some criteria that flowed through that. It was purely based off of the resolution that this group passed. And what we tried to do with that was, when we saw the number of applications to come through to do it without at least something objective. We felt we needed to at least get things organized that way. What we found, again, was a lot of the projects did not fit every criteria, right? And we didn't expect that to be the case, but the way it weighed it out, it gave us some direction. But more or less what it allowed us to do is it allowed us to drive our conversation on why we weighted something more heavily for one project over the other instead of just the total score. But it at least allowed us to organize our thoughts and how we assessed each project. And really, it also helped us ask specific questions of the applicants to make sure that if they didn't address it in their process or in their application, that we asked those questions so we could better assess the overall project.
I see. I agree with Commissioner Archer. There are still some questions I have more about the process rather than critiquing the recommendations themselves. And I feel a little less informed than I would like to be in order to make a vote. I look at the 4 recommended projects and I'm familiar with them, and I don't say in any way that they're not worthy of consideration, but there is a subject that came up, and that's equity. And I think that someone kind of mentioned that in the sense that, you know, the county, Auburn did get included in a recommendation, which I think is good. But there is still, in my mind, some question about equity as we develop and move forward in the city to make sure that it's not concentrated in just one area. And that would be a question that I would look at in almost any one of these applications. So I'm kind of inclined to ask it to be remanded back so that we could, and ask you and your group to look at, if that it wasn't a part of your scorecard, to look at that as well. Because there might be something in my mind that maybe doesn't meet all of these criteria, but to balance what we're trying to do for the county and the city, that maybe that equity issue could be discussed in some detail to give what maybe isn't the project that would meet all criteria a little more consideration. But thank you for your explanation for the process. I appreciate the work that you all have put in for it.
Well, just a few comments on that. Saying no to some things is hard. I think as we're finding tonight with you all is sometimes saying yes is harder. Okay. We were given some direction from this group to go forward with the process, and most certainly any further direction would be welcome. And if we have to go back to it, we'll see if the committee wants to get back together. I'll tell you that. Also, I can't guarantee that group wants to sign up again. But you know, with that, I will point out some of the criteria that is in the resolution is that it has to be inclusive for the community and accessible for the whole community. And that includes not only overall programming, so it's a public space, but also transportation to and equity therein with that process. So I don't think the criteria that you all adopted was completely void of the inclusiveness. However, the specific example that was given today in public comment certainly has its merits.
Commissioner Archer?
If it was to be inclusive for the whole community, City of Auburn, that doesn't jive with that, to me.
That was one of the, you know, again, not everyone hit all the marks. Okay. There was no perfect.
And I understand that. Yeah. And I think what you said as far as quantitative analysis, documenting priorities and so on sounds great. I wish we could see that for transparency and openness to the public, and when we make a decision about spending $2 million of taxpayer money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other comments? At this time, there is a motion on the floor that has been seconded. Motion made by Mayor Del Isla, seconded by Councilmember Deputy Mayor Jensen. At this time, you've heard from the body that there may be a request to defer this back to the Quality of Place Committee for further. Mayor, it's your motion. Do you wish to allow this to be deferred back, or do you wish to move forward on the motion?
So I'm really struggling here because I think that both sides have really great points. I think that I feel like there is a disconnect between what the community has asked us to do through Momentum 2022 by giving us the pillars of where they want us to invest. I think that there is a disconnect in the sense that the understanding that jobs, roads, and what was the other thing? Something like that. But the deal is that this is to create jobs. I'm also struggling because I do hear the fact that absolutely we are expending $2 million of our community, and it would be nice to maybe have those numbers to show, so that we could just have them for the record. But at the same time, the other concern that I have is that we utilized volunteer time of key leaders in our community that again just didn't have to do this, to put themselves, like, I think that you said it best, Commissioner Archer, the most thankless situation that they have to, deal with. And most importantly, the other concern that I have is that we have had significant investment in various areas that are here from the private sector as well, of individuals that are waiting to see if this body is going to reach out and just, say, hey, we're partnering in a public-private partnership. I struggle. My question is, are any of these projects, if we were to bring them back in March, for example, which is our next JEDO meeting? February. Are any of these projects time-bound to the point that that not making this vote now happen would significantly delay any of these projects?
I might note that this is also the last meeting of in 2019, the chairship, which switched back over to the city, and Mayor, you would then be the chair, and there would also be potentially change in voting members, and
Correct.
Commissioner Bueller will no longer be with us, as we would have Commissioner Rippon, which is still trying to get used to saying that after having Commissioner Bueller for this length of time. But we would have a change in voting members at that meeting.
Yeah, and then we would have to explain everything again and go through the whole process with a brand-new group of individuals. I would like to uphold my motion, and I'll just look to the deputy mayor to see if he would like to uphold his second.
I would, and I would make a couple of comments if you all don't mind. First and foremost, the United States of America is a republic and not a democracy, and there's a key reason why it's set up like that and why it's important here this evening. The voters made a decision in 2014, and then time changed. And so now we're faced with trying to answer a new definition of economic development, one that wasn't necessarily defined when voters made an initial decision. And the reason why we're a republic is because we, as the governing body, are entrusted with the decision, the obligation to make a decision on their behalf. And we have to try and figure out what they really want and not necessarily what they say, what they're telling us. Our community has come to us several times and conveyed that they want a nice place. They want amenities. They want things to. They want quality of place. Now, in 2014, when that ballot language was there, they may not have had the ability to communicate that. It's our job to get them what they really need and not necessarily what they have the opportunity to ask for. So that's a key thing that's important. I struggle with sending this back to a group of volunteers and telling them, sorry, you didn't do a good enough job, when we didn't give them explicit parameters and explicit instructions to follow. I do agree with Commissioner Archer, it would be nice to see some of the documentation. We didn't ask them to retain it. We didn't ask them what type of documentation to produce, at least not that I can find in the resolution that we charged them with. So I really struggled to push it back to them when, now we're moving the goalposts and hiding the ball. So that's a challenge for me. I would add one caveat, or one note to this. I do serve on the board of the Jayhawk Theater. I was not part of the grant application process in any way. I was not part of the review process. And after speaking with legal counsel, the fact that we're just blessing a decision made by an independent group of people that were not associated with me in any way, I feel confident that I could support this motion if it comes to pass. But I can't foresee sending this back to the group doing any good, given that we haven't. They've produced essentially what we've asked them to, given this motion. And I certainly wouldn't want to start from ground zero, which is exactly what we would do if we delayed the meeting. We'd have to start all over with that whole education process. So with that, I would keep the motion and recommend approval.
Are there other public comment or questions? Councilmember Councilmember Mays.
Thank you, Chair. So, am I mistaken in understanding these are just recommendations? Right? This does not have to be a take it or leave it situation. And I understand the motion that we've got right now is an up or a down vote on these 4 recommendations. But it is up to this body to decide. If we want to change this, we can change this now. I can't because I'm not a voting member, but you can. So I mean, I think if there are other things that you guys want to see, I mean, let's vote on them, or have you vote on them.
I think to add clarification, just so that you are not a non-voting member does not mean that you are not able to add input. It does not mean that you would not have the ability to make a motion or second a motion. It just means that on the final vote, you would not be able to make a final vote. And as I started out after public comment, we do not have to approve this in full. We would be able to take this up one item at a time. We would have been able to take this up as modify the recommendations or send the recommendations back for further discussion. The mayor has made a motion, and there is a motion on the floor to adopt the recommendations as presented, which was seconded. But before, again, we get to public vote, Commissioner Bueller, I'm sorry.
Pointing out to.
Thank you.
Real quick, Deputy Mayor, thank you for the government lesson.
Anytime.
One thing I will say is I'm not exactly sure what exactly quality of place means and what our voters were telling us that they wanted in that. I am sure one of the best pieces of advice that Senator Dole gave me when I worked for him was spend your constituents' money like it's your own. And when I don't have all the information, I can't do that. That being said, I want to rephrase one of the things I said at the beginning of this meeting. I am comfortable going ahead and as Councilman May said, individually going through these because of my familiarity with some of those. And I think that possibly may be the route to take. That's just my position. Thank you.
Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll just weigh in briefly, recalling how this process went before. What I am hearing, I think that Mr. Kuda did a very good job of going through what the criteria were, and they do match what is in the resolution that this body passed. I do recall asking about that public vote business. I don't have all my minutes with me, but I think if you go back to whatever that meeting was, you answered it or you pursued it. So I think that answer is there. It sounds to me from the discussion that voting on them one at a time might be a good resolution. With the discussion just about the only 2 topics really to come up were equity and whether they really would attract jobs for city and county. And you've got 3 that would meet that and 1 that there appear to be questions about. And so I'm not a voting member either, but it looks to me like you could do them one at a time. As I think back to Mr. Kuda's explanation and look at the list, it seems like they kind of speak to, without the scorecard in hand, how they evaluate them, so.
Commissioner Archer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a substitute proposal. I think we all agree that the downtown plaza is key to the success of our community. I would propose that we agree to spend $1 million for the downtown plaza and defer consideration of the other $1 million and have that reviewed again by the Citizens Committee. That may get us off dead center.
Mayor Della Isla, would you accept that as a motion, amendment to your motion?
I find it arbitrarily, Commissioner Archer, that we're just saying $1 million for this one item when the recommendation was different. I wouldn't be able to support that motion. But thank you, that's a great motion.
Is there other public, or is there other discussion by this body? Seeing none, that then leads us to the vote. Again, the motion is made is to adopt the recommendations as presented from the Quality of Place work group, and it was approved by the voting members or the body executive board of GO-TOPECA and presented us this evening. So,
Commissioner Bueller?
Aye.
Commissioner Cook?
aye.
Commissioner Archer?
No.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Aye.
Councilmember Padilla?
No.
Councilmember Lesser?
No.
It's 4-3.
It passes 4-3. Our next item.
Item 8, discussion item, Washburn Tech East, ETLC project.
Okay. Since we have a number of people that are leaving, why don't we recess for 5 minutes to allow the members that wish to leave. That would be a motion to recess for 5 minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Bueller. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. That passes. We are in recess for 5 minutes. Calling us back to order. Mayor, I might note this is probably why they don't give commissioners gavels.
We don't have one in our chamber.
So,
It's okay, knock yourself out tonight.
Yeah. Calling us back to order to proceed with our next item, item number 8.
Item 8, discussion item, Washburn Tech East ETLC project.
This is an update and possible action item. I'm going to start by maybe looking to the county councilor to pick up where we are at with the East Topeka Learning Center and its status.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to cover this comprehensively, but also not take hours and hours. It's been 3 months since we last met on this. When we last met, this board authorized my office to ascertain whether or not the contractor Champion was in default of the contract, and if so, declare default under the contract and move forward with a claim on the bond. And that's exactly what we did. And there's a contractual process for that. So that's not something that we could simply just write a letter and do. We had to first request that the architect agree with us that the contractor was in default. And once we received that in writing, then we had to notify the contractor that we felt that they were in default and give them the reasons why and give them an opportunity to cure that default or fix the problems. Of course, they didn't, and so once that time period lapsed, we then declared default and terminated the contract officially, and on the same day notified the bond company by certified mail that we were making a claim under the bond. That triggered a meeting in early October with the bond company's representatives and legal counsel. It took a little bit of time to get that meeting organized because they had to fly in from the East Coast. During that meeting, we requested, after discussion of the various options, one thing that matters is when you look at the requirements of the bond, when we trigger that bond, the bond company actually has several options. It isn't just do whatever the owner wants them to do. The bond company has various legal options, but one thing that the bond company offered to do that we took up from them was to rebid the remaining work to be done in the project. And they, through discussion with us and our consultant, Dean Farrell, selected a list of contractors to request to make a bid. These were contractors recommended by Dean Farrell as contractors that he knew were well-respected and well-qualified to complete the project. Bids were then let by the bond company, and bids were received by the bond company on November 9th. The low bidder, and there wasn't a lot of difference between the two, comes to us in high recommendation. That company is Kelly Construction. That company was one of the original bidders on the project when we started the project, so they were very familiar with the project to begin with. The way the bid was set up was that the bidder should put an amount of money in the bid to cover any unknown deficiencies in the work that may be discovered later. So basically, the bid documents made clear that this new contractor is going to assume the project, assume all the warranties that are going to be due on the project, and carefully inspect the project to make sure that they're comfortable with what the condition is of the project, and be ready to assume all issues and take it over. So since November 9th, we have been negotiating both with the bond company and Kelly Construction over what is the way forward. And the way forward will involve a settlement agreement with the bond company along with a new contract with this new general contractor. The proposal that I would make is that we go ahead and enter into a new contract, we being Shawnee County, set up so that this transaction is set up in the same way that it was originally, to take advantage of the same sales tax exemption for the same reasons that we did before. We're still working with HTK as the architect to complete the project. If we can sign that contract and execute it before Christmas, then the completion date for the project will be May 1st. And I've spoken with representatives of Washburn Tech, and that would give them sufficient time to get into the building and staff up and be ready for summer classes. So basically where we're at, once the delay occurred, we lost the first semester. And I know Washburn Tech's been working. Go right ahead.
Mayor Delisla.
Thank you, Chair.
So my question is, what are we doing with regards to the bond company holding this process? And how much is Washburn University and Washburn Tech going to receive as funding and support in lieu of the space and everything that they're having to do to make accommodations to provide education?
That's one of the issues we need to work through with the bond company and the settlement agreement. And just to sort of simply break down how that settlement agreement should work. We have an amount of money left in the project fund under the original contract. That project was about 50% completed, and we paid about 50% of what was due under that contract. There is going to be a higher cost to complete it, okay? And the bond company is going to have to take care of, we're going to keep the money that remains in the original, I'll call that Fund A. The bond company is going to have to come up with Fund B, and that's the amount of money to close the gap between what it's going to cost to complete and the money that we have. And then there's Fund C, which is under Champion's original contract, there was a clause for liquidated damages of $500 per day. And that is the last sticking point with the bond company that we are haggling over, and that is how much and when to start the liquidated damages and how much that should be. And I've been demanding the full amount from the last contract date that was in effect in December, this month, almost this day, to May 1st, which is the new projected substantial completion date. So we've got to reach agreement with the bond company on that issue, and we've got to reach a final contract with the general contractor. I've got a meeting set up with the general contractor in my office and his attorney on Friday morning to hammer out the final details. We've traded contracts with the general contractor. I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to do that on Friday and get that completed. We've traded the settlement agreement back and forth a couple of times with the bond company. I'm waiting for the bond company to respond to my request. One of the things that they've provided to me is an argument as to why they shouldn't have to pay liquidated damages from a date in December to a date in January. Their legal counsel's response is, well, there's case law in Kansas that says that we cannot get them for that date, and so I've asked that that be provided to me, because I'm not going to recommend that we simply just give that up without clear case law that indicates that we're not entitled to that. So the idea would be through the liquidated damages, and that's one thing I've explained to the bond company, is that we're not seeking a windfall through liquidated damages. We're seeking those damages to offset the costs that Washburn Tech has incurred due to the delay. Another component of that is, let's not forget about the New Markets Tax Credits program, and one of the requirements through that program is that the project funds related to that project must be spent on the project, so we can't simply grab a windfall and then use it for something else. It needs to be included. One of the other things that I did was contact Jeff White, our consultant, on that. They have been receiving copies of the draft contracts to make sure that the attorneys on that side of the transaction are aware of the structure of what we're proposing, and to make sure that they do not have any issues or concerns. So far, they have not communicated any issues or concerns with the proposed structure of it, so I don't think that'll be an issue. The goal is to get this wrapped up, and on the county's Thursday, the 20th, next week's agenda for execution of both documents, so that we can get this moving forward before Christmas and maintain that May 1st substantial completion date. And that's where we're at.
Mr. Crowell, any of the damages, who do those get paid to? Is it paid to go to Topeka? Is it paid to JEDO? Who is receiving these monies?
Shawnee County is listed as the owner, but that would go back into the project budget. The liquidated damages would go back to the project budget and then would be set for JEDO to allocate. But I would certainly recommend, and the New Markets Tax Credits program may actually, I think, require that that be used only on the project for something like defraying Washburn Tech's costs that they've incurred due to the delay.
And if we are unable to reach an agreement with Hartford, the bond company, then would a lawsuit be filed against Hartford?
It could, if ultimately we cannot get this settled and we continue to incur damages, that will be an option.
And does Hartford appreciate the amount of damage that this has done to the East Topeka, and not just East Topeka, but the entire Shawnee County community?
Well, I've been communicating that, and so has Dean Farrell, and so has the other representatives when we've met with them. And I've provided all of you some of the emails that have been sent back and forth throughout the last 3 months, so you can see the nature of the conversations we've been having.
And also, we've been keeping the residents of East Topeka up to date on what has been transpiring, and so the local community is aware of what's transpiring with the schools, and so they're ready to enroll in June or May now. And I see Barbara, is there still outreach to the?
There is. This was Jim's night, but I'll just refer you to page 61 in your packet. Yes, Washburn Tech East is continuing to do their orientation dates. They actually are planning, as we've talked about in smaller meetings, they're planning to begin classes in January on the east side. I believe they'll have an announcement forthcoming, so you should watch within the coming week or two to indicate that some classes will be able to start on the east side on behalf of Washburn Tech East. But again, there's cost incurred with that for them to have to do that beyond what we're doing with the project. I'll stand for any questions, but I did not intend, I don't have a presentation for you this evening.
Are there any questions for Barbara? Okay, thank you.
I've been operating under the assumption, gained through these discussions we've had already, that you don't want to waive liquidated damages to get a settlement. You want those damages recovered, and so that's why we don't have a settlement yet, because they've yet to offer the full amount that I believe is due. If they come up with a reasonably good supported argument for why we should get X amount instead of this amount, then we'll discuss that. But until that occurs, we're continuing to demand the full amount due under the contract.
Councilmember Lesser?
Yeah, you sent I saw an email that you'd sent out today that was kind of a summary of the event that was very well done. One of the things that you had mentioned in there was that Champion had made some assertions through their bankruptcy filing. I wanted a little bit of a clarification on.
I didn't send you that. That wouldn't have been me. They have filed bankruptcy.
It was in an email that you had sent to Miss Marple that you'd carbon copied us on.
Well, they've filed bankruptcy. I don't know that.
We can talk later about it.
Sure.
It's not ringing a bell to
I'm
me.
not sure exactly what assertions they've made, but we'll talk later.
That's fine. That's fine.
At this time, Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Thank you. So just a quick question then. So at this point, you don't see, barring all things falling, what you anticipate, a reason why we can't make the May 1st deadline or whatever the date is in May?
So far, if we can get these agreements signed up, the contractor is ready to assume control of the project next week and get started.
Any idea when the schedule will sort of firm up at the point where we can be more than reasonably certain it's going to work?
It's a matter of, really, I am very confident because I'm meeting with the principals of Kelly Construction and their attorney on Friday. We only have we have the wording of exactly how we are going to cover the project for any defective work done by Champion, and I'm not saying there was, but if there's anything out there that is later discovered, we want to make sure that we're covered so that that is taken care of.
So these additional discussions with Hartford have no bearing on Kelly starting the project?
Well, it does, because I don't think we can accept a settlement with Hartford, and I think the two things are married together.
Sure.
Because that liability question, it's tied together. We want to make sure that one party or the other is going to definitely agree to assume responsibility for the work.
Well, I'm sorry, I meant with the liquidated damages. We don't have to stop the whole project to sue them for liquidated damages. Kelly Construction can get started? Or can you talk?
We could,
I don't know.
well, we're getting into the weeds a little bit.
Okay.
But
Good enough.
there is a risk in taking that approach. Let me say that. A legal risk in taking that approach with regard to those liquidated damages.
So there is still an outstanding possibility we could delay if necessary.
Yes, but we're going to do everything we can to avoid that. The delay also costs Hartford money too. So they have an incentive to get this done because each day is another $500. But we're going to do everything we can, and that's why I sent the email, so you can see we're making ourselves available to them whenever they choose to get here and do it.
Well, thanks for taking this on. I know this was not in your end-of-year plans.
Well, let's just hope we can get this wrapped up before Christmas so that we can get the project back underway and then completed before the summer session.
To get us back on the fairway, do you need any action from us tonight, or would this just then move, again, just for information for the body?
I'm giving this for information to the body. The action will actually be taken by the Shawnee County Commission, the original body who held the contracts with Champion and who exercised the right on the bond. But I went into detail on the liquidated damages issue so that you would know that if we do reach agreement, it's because we're getting our liquidated damages. Now, if it looks like we're going to deadlock and they're not going to agree to pay that amount, then maybe we need to come back and decide what's the hard choice that we want to make at that point. Moving forward and getting it done and waiving some of those, or no way. We want them no matter what, and we'll just let the project continue to delay. And again, that's a hard choice to make. I wouldn't want to signal to Hartford tonight which way we may want to go.
Any other questions for Mr. Crowell tonight? All right. Moving on to our next item, item number 9.
Item 9, discussion item with possible action, Community Broadband Task Force.
Deputy Mayor, I think that if you want to kind of pick up where we have left off or where we stand, and I see Ms. Millsap also.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So Gina and I are here this evening to give you a bit of an update on where we're at with the broadband project for the city and the county. This has really been an exciting project for me to work on. I kind of got sucked into this thing after making some less than ideal comments about where it was going.
To volunteers?
That's right, that's right. And I got to tell you, again, this team pulled me in with open arms and allowed me to be part of it, and it's really been an exciting thing to work on, and I'm very pleased to come back and share some of the things that we found with you as part of the RFI we sent out. The response we got was, in some cases, what we were expecting, in other cases, not at all, and pleasantly so. So if you'll pull up the PowerPoint, we'll run through there real quick. If not, it was in your packets. And hit it and see if it switches.
Am I supposed to hit something?
Click arrow right.
Where are we here? Here?
Right arrow keys what I'm
Oh, here.
Yep. There you go.
Alrighty.
Okay, all right. So this is, for the most part, the discussion we had with the contractor, Tilson, at our last meeting to sort of figure out exactly where we were and where we were going. These are the same goals that we've been working on for, correct me if I'm wrong, Gina, but we presented these a year ago, maybe early this summer.
These are the goals that we started with the project, that we've refined them over time to be
Yes.
more specific.
So, even though we're going to change directions a little bit, or asked to change directions a little bit, these goals haven't changed. And where we're ultimately going to attempt to wind up is still the same. Now, I'm not saying it can't change in the future as technology improves and that sort of thing, but for the most part, the end game is still the same end game. We haven't hit the ball, we haven't moved the goalpost. Very important. So, when I got involved, we decided that we needed to reach out to the incumbent carriers, to some folks that aren't yet participating in this area, and try to get a feel for what what they could do, what their plans were, what their ideas for the future technology of the community and the region were. And these are just a few that we met with. Cox and AT&T were at the table right away with great ideas, great participation, incredible community partners. Mercury Wireless was also there immediately. They're headquartered here, believe it or not, and they have service throughout the Midwest. So it was pretty exciting to have them come in and share some of their expertise. QuickCom does not participate in Shawnee County very much, but they came and discussed at length with us some of how they have worked in other communities. KS FiberNet, huge backbone provider throughout the state, and they're kind of buried underground for the most part. So, Allo Communications responded with really some interesting ideas and concepts that we hadn't considered. So it was pretty exciting to hear from them. Any other comments on that, Gina?
Especially in regard to rural access.
Yes.
Allo had some interesting ideas.
Yeah. So, let's talk about some of the things we were interested in looking for. I'll just quickly run these. Current and future services, prices, expansions, upgrades. Where are they at now? Where do they see them going? And what can we as government do to aid and or get out of the way? Conditions under which they can come in and invest without government money. That was one of our first things we asked, was what do you need that's not taxpayer cash? You know, is it vertical assets? Is it better access to right-of-way? Is it somebody who can help you navigate the two governments working together? That sort of thing. And surprisingly, we got some interesting answers there. Key assets, we talked about that. What public policies? You know, a lot of our codes in the city of Topeka need to be reviewed for new technology. So, things to take a look at. Non-financial, financial, in-kind assistance, that sort of thing. These were the things that we really wanted to try and understand when we met with providers, to try and get a better feel for where we were at as the government, what our role is in growing access in the region. Any other comments? So this slide has a special meaning for me as one of the Google Fiber kids from almost 10 years ago, and I'm delighted to tell you that I lit up my Cox gigabit service at my house, and it was everything I dreamed it would be 10 years ago when I was lobbying for Google Fiber to come here. It's glorious. But,
Continue to rub it in.
yeah. Or Gina. So, but this is the next big thing in technology, at least in terms of wireline service. So let's talk about what we need to be a gigabit city. How do people leverage that? How is it delivered? What's that look like? That sort of thing. So, you know, for the most part, when you look at wireline service in the city, most of the incumbents did not necessarily need financial assistance from the government to deploy a lot of this stuff. It was more administrative support, right-of-way access, that sort of thing. Really was quite surprising, and we were thrilled to hear that they're not just after government money.
And certainly encouraging, like city and county, to cooperate, to collaborate, along with school districts.
Yes. I would also add, we have talked with all the school districts in the region, and I'm so incredibly happy with the level of partnership they have come to the table. They are very interested in this project and very willing to come to the table, partner with us, and really try to help reach more people than we could on our own.
They have some ideas about strategies that they would actually participate in, potentially with resources.
Yes. So, and we're having those conversations now to sort of see how that could work. So, okay, on to the next one. This is Gina's favorite slide. The rural unserved areas. So, you know, primarily this is mostly in the county, although there are some, you know, fringe areas on the city where the population density just isn't enough for the incumbents to afford to build out in there. So we looked at, you know, how do you reach those underserved areas? And is it wireless? Is it cellular? You know, there's a whole slew of technologies that are coming down the pipeline. So these were just some of the things we looked at. You know, what's it take to get coverage there? Expanding wireless broadband. You know, there are some fiber providers out there that they'll run fiber to a point, put up an antenna, and shoot it the rest of the way. How does that work? You know, Tilson provided an example of how a countywide network they would build would look like. Then it was fiber to a point and then wireless the rest of the way. So, you know, and there are some wireless providers out there that have gotten into the fiber business just to provide the connection to where their tower is, so that they can provide enough connectivity out there. We talked about, you know, what expansion and improvement in service is possible without public sector help. Where are you already going to build things? You know, do you need government funding? Would this happen but for? There's always that but for test. So, the general consensus was in the rural areas, though, we are going to have to come to the table with some sort of financial incentive, just because the initial hump to build that infrastructure, it's just not financially possible for the private sector without some sort of government sector help. We don't know exactly what that is yet and what it looks like, but the bottom line is at this point, in the rural areas, at least we think we're probably going to need to have something, though we're still trying to sort out exactly what that looks like, who might need it, and how far that might go. So,
Most likely it would be for the fiber backhaul.
yes.
Not the wireless component.
Right.
So at some point, everything has to connect to the fiber.
The nice thing about fiber is that that is a pretty solid investment, because fiber is just glass. And when you put glass in the ground, you can change the technology on each end of the piece of glass and increase the speed, improve the connectivity, that sort of thing. As opposed to if you invest in wireless, all that gear has to be torn down and replaced.
I just want to add, we have about 45,000 people who live in the unincorporated areas of the county. It's not necessarily rural, it's suburban, but
Sure.
it's the city of Topeka is in the county. You are in Shawnee County.
Yes.
But the unincorporated areas that are more remote is what you're referring to,
Yes,
too. But we do have a large population that live in the
Yeah.
unincorporated areas.
And that's the key to look at when you look at, you know, where our subsidies are appropriate. Because there's a certain population density where there's enough subscriber take to afford the infrastructure cost to build that, and then afford the monthly maintenance and service and that sort of thing. And so that's the real key point is, you know, do you really need government funds to build in an area where there's enough people that you could afford it on your own? So these are things that we're still trying to sort out in that aspect. So, in fact, that's what the next slide is really about, is more the rural business case where we think government funds are necessary to get it done versus where it could stand on its own. And the larger aspect is then where do you package that? You know, where do you say, well, okay, we'll give you some money to cover here, but we also want you to build here, and we know that you can make money enough to at least break even there. Any other comments you want to add?
Nope. I think you've done it.
Moving right along.
All right.
All right.
So I'm going to take a few minutes because this actually came up at the last JEDO board meeting, digital inclusion. Lizone mentioned this, the issue of equity overall, and certainly digital equity has, the mayor mentioned the phrase digital divide. We're all very familiar with that. So this is not intended to be a deep dive, and I also want to emphasize that we're not starting at ground zero on this issue. A lot of work has been done in the last 20 years on digital inclusion, so that's good news. But the work is not done. So we're all familiar with the concept of literacy, basic literacy. You have to be able to read and write to survive in society. But now you also must be digitally literate to survive as well. It's no longer enough to just have the basic ability to comprehend text and read. So we've all heard that digital divide phrase. And really what we're talking about is inequity in access, in the use of, and the impact of technology. So if you're on the wrong side of that divide, you're living in the digital desert. That's another way to think of it. And that's really true for a lot of people who have limited incomes and who live in rural and unconnected areas. They might be suburban areas as well. Digital inclusion itself refers to the activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and use of information and communication technologies. And there's 5 key components. These things have to happen for digital inclusion to occur. It's the formula. You have to have affordable, robust broadband service. You have to have internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of users, and that's different for different people. For some, it's a phone, for some, it's a tablet, for some, it's a computer. People have to have access to digital literacy training. No one is born knowing how to do this. Even though we talk about digital natives, that simply means that we now have a generation that has grown up looking at screens. You have to have quality technical support, because the more technical, the more stuff you have, the more hardware you have, the more support you need to make sure it's running. And you need applications and online content that is relevant to and enables and encourages self-sufficiency, and for everyone to participate in all aspects of being a citizen. So as you look at the slide, we could point out a number of things. But one thing jumped out for me, because it's something that we've learned at the library over the last several years. Participation levels tend to be low for low-cost internet programs. Why? Because in many cases, the people they target are not digitally literate. In other words, they don't have the skills or knowledge to use the technology. They don't necessarily understand what the technology can do for them in terms of applying for a job, getting a better job, helping their children succeed in school. So for those individuals, paying for an internet connection may not be the priority. Oops, I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that. We'll just keep it there. That digitally literate person has a lot of skills. There's the technical component. There's a cognitive component to find, understand, evaluate, and create information. The ability to use technologies, use a cell phone, use a laptop. Understands the relationship between technology and personal privacy. Gets that, understands the need for that. Is able to use those skills and appropriate technology to communicate, to collaborate, to be part of society. So the question I always ask when any new project is broached is, so who's going to own this? Who takes responsibility for it? So what I'm going to tell you tonight is the library is not the exclusive owner of this, but we are willing to take a leadership role because we have for 20 years. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of background information of what's already going on with digital inclusion. And by the way, regardless of what happens, the library will continue to pursue this because it's part of our mission. Over the past 20 years, we've offered over 63,000 hours of computer instruction and technology instruction, from everything from taming the mouse, which is that first introduction to a computer, here's how you turn it on, to introduction to the internet, to helping people retrain for new jobs, brush up on their skills with things like Microsoft Office and Google Docs, and resume building. We also have specialized classes on how to use devices like smartphones and tablets, and how to use the many online resources the library has. So let me ask you, how many of you are aware of the online resources the library provides with a library card? Maybe some of them? Okay, so conservatively, we're spending $500,000 a year on digital content. I will repeat that, $500,000 on digital content. About $200,000 of that is specifically on education and training, and things like software development. So it's products like Treehouse Coding and Design, which has instruction for beginning coders as well as veteran software developers. Lynda.com, which includes online video courses in business skills and creative skills. Learning Express Library, which has test tutorials and ebooks for career preparation, for getting your GED, for college admissions, and student resources for all ages. And the Mango Learning Language, which helps people become proficient in over 70 languages. And that's just a handful of what's available, again, with a library card for people's taxes. We have computer labs established in cooperation with Shawnee County Parks and Recreation in 6 community centers, and those have been in place for the last 4 years. Training and programs occur there, as well as children just being able to go and do homework. People can apply for jobs there. We also have a partnership with the Topeka Housing Authority, and we work with them to create a technology center at the Deer Creek apartment complex, where there are 92 family units, each with incomes under $10,000, but they are working. And Trey is here tonight, or he was here tonight, and we're talking about initiating a new pilot project in 2019, specifically at Deer Creek. We also have a library card campaign. We're beginning year 3 in 2019. The goal is for every school-aged child in Topeka and Shawnee County to have a library card. And I want to give major props to Marty Stessman at Shawnee Heights, because he was our guinea pig. He volunteered his district And that's where we began. But the goal is ultimately for every school-age child to have a library card, because then they can take advantage of all those resources that the schools can afford to invest in. Every day on the phone, by chat, email, sometimes even in person. We answer all kinds of questions. We've answered, to this date this year, we've added 40,000 questions on everything from job applications, taxes, starting a business, research, how to use technology. Almost 20,000 questions just on becoming more digitally literate. So I'm not saying we're the only game in town. We have over 100 partners that we work with on a regular basis. But we are the biggest and we're the most accessible source for anyone in the community. No fees, no requirements. You ask for help, we give it. And we can scale services like this in a way that no one else can because of the size of the library and the fact that it's our primary mission. But the job is not done. Every day, librarians are helping people set up their very first email account. And I want you to think about that. We've been using email for almost 30 years. And there are still people in the community that have no email account. And why are they getting an email account? Because they're applying for a job online. Because 80% of jobs, regardless of the level or the pay, you have to apply for online. If you don't have email, a prospective employer can't communicate with you. So we're working with our partners to improve and expand our digital inclusion efforts. And we are doing a reboot of that, especially based on what we've learned. Because in this particular case, this isn't about the broadband being the end game, and it's not about the money. It's about making sure our fellow residents have the information and the knowledge and education they need to understand that this is a valuable tool for them, so that they don't get left behind. So
that was one of the surprising things I took away from it, was that in this particular case, it's not necessarily access to connectivity. Cox and AT&T both in this area provide a low-cost option with certain qualifications you have to meet, but in the vast majority of cases, those connection options are there and are available, and folks just aren't using them. And the training aspect is why, the knowledge to use that, the understanding why they even need that. It's just not there. So if we were to ask for any kind of financial assistance from the body in this case, it would be more in training. And how do we get people the skills that they need to then go and choose to get online? So what we've taken out of all this is the need to, well, I'm skipping ahead here. So this is where we're at in the process that we presented to you over the summer, when we shifted just slightly. We've issued the request for information, and normally we would go to request for proposals now. But as we started talking about what is necessary to get the job done, we think there's an opportunity to leverage the companies that are interested in incentives other than financial. And so the suggestion of the contractor was to, go ahead and flip it, Gina, if you would please, was to step back and create this broadband business assistance initiative, which is kind of a mouthful. We'll have to come up with a government-approved acronym for it. But, so basically the idea is, this is a single point of contact to help all of the players in Shawnee County and in the city of Topeka that want to improve access for folks in the city of Topeka and in the county. AT&T and Cox, newcomers, anybody that wants to expand and grow, this would be the person or the group of people that they come and talk to. The goal behind that is you can make one phone call to one place and use that, leverage those connections to sort out what you need to do to improve coverage anywhere in the county. So basically what we're asking to do in this instance is swing the funding that we would have used to do the RFP into this broadband assistance initiative. Not quite sure who is going to own that or where. Ultimately, it needs to be at least a person who's in charge of it somewhere, whether that's at the city or the county. It could even be a contractor at Go Topeka. But at some point, we need to pick that person and sort out where they're going to sit within the organizational structure, and then how they get tied into both the city and the county. They would probably also need to have ties to the Westar too, because that's where a lot of the right-of-way is on poles. So the idea behind that is a lot of these companies that want to expand in the community aren't looking for financial incentives, but they are looking for help to navigate. It's not a complex governmental structure, I won't go that far, but it's not exactly one-stop shop. And it's an area where we can improve, and this would help do that. So you run through this, make sure I've covered everything. What questions are there about this? This is a change in the way the process is.
Are there questions for the broadband work group? Commissioner Archer?
It's kind of hazy what you're asking for, Brendan, and is there money, how much money is involved in this?
So we don't have a cost yet on that, which is why we're not actually asking that we're going to come back to you with a plan on how that would work. So there is an ask in the future, but it's not here yet. Right out of the gate, it would essentially be reallocating funds that we had initially planned to use for the RFP. So we're not asking for additional money right now, but part of it is we need to sort out where this person would live. Is it at the county level? Is it at the city level? Would we agree to take some of the RFP money and fund a contractor who would then sit at Go Topeka? So my question to you all would be to go back to your organizations and look and see if this is a role or if this is a set of skills that you already have within your existing organization. We're not entirely sure that we necessarily need to. We need to sort out what we have and whether or not we need
And I think
folks.
the question becomes, at a certain point, we're a kind of a loose collaboration, right, of people who have come together because we have an interest in this and we're stakeholders. We believe it's important. But I think at a certain point, local government on its side, if you're going to be responsive in terms of this business assistant and kind of smoothing the way, and creating a system that will work for any provider who's interested in coming in, then somebody has to own that within your own infrastructure.
Right. And I agree. I'm just trying to figure out how much money we're talking about, what the accountability, and to who. You understand?
Well, so part of that is we need to sort out if we already have people within our organizations that have the skills to execute these tasks. If they do, then obviously it's just identifying those people and then the government approving them to spend time on that. Right now, we don't know that we have those skills within either organization that has the ability to manage it at this high level. And then we need to sort out an agreement so that if it's somebody at the county, they have the required access into the city and vice versa. And then, of course, this is hugely in the corner of economic development as well, so they have to have the ability to have ties into Go Topeka and the chamber, that sort of thing.
Deputy Mayor, would it be then your request to not issue an RFP, but rather to allow the broadband work group to further develop this assistance?
It would. I would modify slightly, though, to say delay the RFP, because at some point, I think we will have to issue an RFP, especially for some of the more rural parts of the county. Our intent is to see how much we can get using this mechanism without having to spend additional money on an RFP. Or I'm sorry, not on an RFP, to spend additional money as incentives to encourage people to come into the communities. If that makes sense. And Gina, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this.
No, no, that's correct. We want to defer the RFP because actually, until there's an infrastructure in place that would have somebody overseeing, say, these business incentives, we don't know what the effect of that may be very powerful. It may accomplish a lot and may incent, one of these companies to come in and make a bigger capital investment than they've indicated to this point they might be willing to do.
And a lot of the companies we've talked to have indicated they want to expand now. So anything we could do to, as you said, smooth the way and make it easier. A lot of the mechanism for doing that is not giving them money. It's just getting out of their way. And this person could help coordinate and facilitate that across our organizations.
Councilmember Hill.
I'm sorry, but also be a liaison to the broadband agency within the Kansas Department of Commerce, which has gotten a substantial reboot now. And with the next administration, there's every indicator that more resources will be going to that as well.
Oh, good.
Councilmember Hiller.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to chime in on Councilman or Commissioner Archer's question. In terms of money, I'm looking at the 2019 proposed budget. Are we talking about the $39,178 that's in the budget for broadband workforce initiatives?
I don't believe so.
That is, I'm going to defer to Topeka staff because we didn't make any additional recommendation or request. We're living within the original allocation that we were given.
Which was?
200 and, the contract was for $220,000, I believe.
The original budget allocation was 250.
250, and then the contract was actually for 220.
39 is what's still remaining from the original allocation.
Okay, so that's carried
thank you.
forward.
It's part of the 250.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And I share the confusion as well. I thought at one point when you were talking about reaching out, you were talking about finding a resource that could help consumers figure out how they could use existing services or connect.
Well, there's that digital inclusion component.
Right.
That's one part of it, but that's only part of it.
So one part is the digital inclusion, which is pretty much in town.
It's throughout the county.
Be throughout the county. And then a second part is a business liaison.
The second part is developing a business assistance program that smooths the way for providers who are interested in coming in.
Or expanding.
Right.
So it's not really to assist businesses, it is just to work with the providers to get them connected in the opportunities that might be available.
This could also be somebody who's coordinating things like Dig Once policies, that a lot of communities have, where there are interlocal agreements or more informal agreements, say, between city and county and school districts. If you're going in with a backhoe and opening up the ground, then everyone agrees that we'll go ahead and lay conduit and fiber at the same time, because the expense is not in the fiber, it's in opening up the ground.
I see.
So we're basically, we've got two tracks that we're on here. One track is the connectivity, and then the other track is the digital inclusion piece. And the connectivity, so the idea is within the city, and if you guys, the tech people can flip back to that slide, I'll
Which one do you want?
the Gigabit City roadmap. So you were on a second ago. Go one more. Oh, no, keep going the other way, sorry.
Right. Keep going back?
Yeah, the second to last slide.
This.
Oh, sorry, forward.
There we go. Okay.
So the connectivity we're looking for is within the city, gigabit, and then within the county, at least 25 megs. So keep going a couple more, sorry. It was the next slide after. Now you're going backwards, sorry. Yeah, second to the last slide. It's the one that has the Gigabit Cities roadmap and the rural coverage roadmap.
Sorry.
Don't worry, Gina, the library has a course on that.
That's just me.
Stop it.
Yeah, I just.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
There.
This one?
Yes,
okay,
thank you.
sorry.
Okay.
All right.
So this is.
Thank you.
And I don't want to split this up between city and county when we look at infrastructure, but to some degree, within the city, I shouldn't say that. So within populations where it's dense enough to justify the cost of infrastructure, the goal is to push for gigabit. In the areas where the population is not dense enough to justify gigabit service, we're pushing for at least 25 and some sort of other technology, be it wireless, be it free space optical, line of sight lasers. I mean, there's a million different things. So these two overlap for quite a ways, as you can see, moving down through there. And so that top part is what that broadband business assistant solution would help us achieve. And then down at the bottom, and you'll notice that that's mostly on the rural coverage part, because Again, we don't necessarily know that we need that within the areas where there's population density support. So that would be where we talk about issuing an RFP and having financial incentives to build infrastructure and that sort of thing. Again, at this point, we don't foresee needing that within the more densely populated areas just because there's enough people there to generally support the cost. The incentives they're looking for is how to get it done, not so much pay for it. So that's sort of how that breaks up. The second part of that is working with public-private partnerships in the library to try and sort out how do we train people how to use this stuff. And that's not necessarily a city or county, populated or rural area. That's anyone that just needs assistance in understanding the significance of what this is. So there are two essentially countywide initiatives. In the city, we're going to try and use one technology. I shouldn't say the city. In the populated areas, I'm learning. In the populated areas, we're going to focus on trying to get one level of connectivity. And in the less populated areas, we're trying to focus on something different with an eye on cost effectiveness.
But to get finally true broadband, because what exists throughout the rural areas and even some of the suburban areas is it's inadequate. As a matter of fact, you can't stream and you can't use some of the resources that we have. It's just too slow and it's not robust enough.
Imagine not being able to use Netflix at all.
Move into town.
District 1.
Oh, dear.
Commissioner Archer?
You know, something should give up when you move to rural Shawnee County. You have gravel roads, you don't get the fire protection, and I mean, do we have any idea of cost estimates and how we're gonna pay for this? Any idea whatsoever?
When you say this, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the proposal that you've got on board, the gigabyte for the city and the 25 meg for the rural area.
I think what we're
Give me a number,
proposing.
because I've seen over $100 million.
Well, no, and I want to remind you that the model that you saw at the beginning was just that. It was a model, and it would have been the model if we were designing a network from scratch to serve the entire county. So that's off the table.
So what's the model now?
The model we're proposing now is basically the initial investment would be in finding a staff member, either hiring somebody or identifying somebody in the organizations that can actually be given responsibility for working with telecommunications providers to smooth the way for more development. That's the initial proposal.
And there's no idea as far as the cost that's going to be eventually.
Not until we've identified whether or not we have those skills within our organizations now.
Okay.
Because if we do, then in theory, there would be very little cost. But if we don't, then we're going to have to find an FTE somewhere, essentially. So, and that person would then sort of own this whole process. Once we have that lined out and have that person in place and working with all these organizations, the other big question is what the state's going to do. There could be some resources there that we haven't unlocked yet. And so that's why we're so hesitant to give you a number on what it's going to cost to actually connect everyone and train everyone, because we haven't unlocked what the other opportunities are yet, and we certainly do. We want to use those as much as we can so that we're being good stewards of all of the
And our
resources
assumption
we
is
have.
that the private sector is going to bear most of those costs, those capital investments.
The other partnership, we haven't completely sorted out yet, is with the public schools. They have a key interest in both of the things we're trying to do here and have expressed an incredible willingness to partner. So,
Deputy Mayor, then do you, as far as to keep us on track then for tonight, do you have a motion then you would wish to propose?
if the body requires one for us to make this change in direction, then yes, I would propose such.
I think you're saying no action, though, at this point.
Well, we're not asking for more money at this point. We're still within our allocation. We're just sort of moving it around a bit. We're moving the process around a bit. We're still going to require Telson to be part of helping us set up the broadband assistance. We do think, and they've offered to own it and run it for us, but we feel as the team that, this is a long-term game for our community, and we need to take ownership for this. We need to find somebody to be at the helm of this. And so, essentially, the non-action action is, this is what we'd like to do, unless you all are opposed to it. And we're still working to sort out whether or not we have the resources within our organization to do it now, or we need to come back and ask for those to be funded. And if we do, then we would have to identify what an appropriate salary is, where that person would live, who they would report to, and that sort of thing.
But I don't hear any action that's needed to be taken then tonight.
So we can continue our work.
Yes.
We'll take that as a directive.
All right.
How's that?
But if I could.
Commissioner Bueller, yes.
Just, I applaud the project team. This is a complicated issue. It just is. And this conversation has been going on a while in this community. And thank goodness, because the need is not going to go away. It's not going to lessen. It's going to increase. And it's for workforce, those rural school, or the suburban schools, I caught myself. That need is just going to increase.
And education
So-
and telemedicine.
Exactly.
And, yeah,
exactly.
and-
So I think for our community to be ready, you know, that's the most important thing.
And
So
without your
thank
early
you.
work, we wouldn't be nearly this far along.
Well,
So-
we kept it brewing, kept it going, but we're making progress. We are making progress.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
particularly
So
pleased.
thank you. And
All
tell
right,
the rest
then
of the project
I'll
team
assume
thank
then
you.
that you will expect a report at your quarterly meeting.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Commissioner. On the customer service side, if you will, the user side, which is partly why I was confused before, you gave us quite a thorough review of the services that the library, which is a city-county library, is offering now. I know that I found anyway, when you're trying to introduce something and really engage people, creating a new resource isn't necessarily the best, but instead focusing folks on a place that they already know that's accessible, broad hours and times and so on. So is there a need for us, in your view, to be also brainstorming about a central point of contact, or is the library already?
Well, we haven't quite sorted that out yet, and again,
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of it is we're trying to sort out what partnerships we already have. Our goal is to leverage our existing assets and resources, determine where we can make new connections and build new partnerships, and then decide if we need to go out and build something completely new.
I think, and with Momentum 2022, you know, the collective impact model is one that we want to emulate as well.
Right.
And so there's workforce development, there's a lot of entities working on digital inclusion for various ages and demographics. We can do better if we're collectively working more closely together.
Good enough for now. Thank you.
All right, with then no action being taken, Mr. Watson, I know you had signed up, but there is no action being taken, but I'm still going to allow you to come up and just make a comment, again, limited to 4 minutes since you have, but recognize there's no action being taken tonight.
Thank you, I understand no action. I'm Carl Watson at Astor Fiber, and I'm once again excited, even more excited than when I spoke to you a little bit ago. So, one, Gina, thanks for leading this process, and she's really doing a nice job. And Vice Mayor, I don't know if I got the right terminology. Deputy Mayor.
No vice.
Thank you, too. So, and thank you to this group for your earlier vote. And of course, my issues overlap with previously. So I'd like to, Commissioner Archer, if you would listen, I know you're listening, but I just want to address you specifically.
Yes, sir.
I love your approach. I'm a businessman. I'd like to know how much all this costs. 2 years ago, I went out, I built a gigabit network. I can tell you how much it costs. If you'd like to see my invoices that I've paid, I can share those with you. It cost me about $500 per home to install fiber connections that are high speed, 100 up, 100 down, that I'm now selling for $35 a month. No contracts, no equipment. Sign up today, easy plan. You can come talk to my customers. I've got customers that we're paying $180 a month for what I call the triple play. A landline that no one needs anymore. Cable TV, which people are figuring out they don't need anymore, and some type of internet service buried in it that they didn't understand. And I now have very basic customers that we're paying $500 a month in rent, and $180 a month for internet service in their mind. And now they're paying me $35 a month to provide 10 times the speed, okay? I hooked them up for less than $500 per unit. The plan that I submitted earlier for the quality of place, which argue quality of place however you would like, but I submitted to hook up 1,000 homes in the county outside of the city, to Commissioner Bueller's comment, 1,000 homes outside of the community for $700 with high speed, the same service in the same way. Now, I think I can do that in the county with something around $25 a month for the fees. And it'll vary between, I'm hoping I can hit the gigabit speeds, but I can price it for 20 to 25 megabits up and down, which qualifies for high speed for $25 a month. And I'd be really excited to go through the details of that with anybody that is willing to listen. I have the costs, $700 a home. I already had the proposal that I submitted. I still have that documentation from Quality of Place. And I'm really excited to present that. Now, I'd like to do a couple decimal points here because we're business people, and I heard earlier business decisions. This group paid for a study that cost several $100,000 a few years ago, and it talked about GDP, and it said one of the major drivers is that if you have connectivity, you can get a 3% bump in GDP for Shawnee County, a 3% bump. Wichita State just published a study, and you can't quite tell what Topeka's GDP is because it's buried behind a black line that says 0, okay? And that was published in TK Magazine, and I can give you the references if you'd like to see it. But I would propose this group think about supporting gigabit connectivity as a direct driver for GDP. And the last comment, I'm down to 3 seconds here, the last comment would be Momentum 2022. I'd like some clarity. Does that end at the beginning of 2022 or at the end of 2022? Because I'll tell you this timeline, we're already bumping up against the end of that. And if we don't start to take action, our big strategy for driving GDP, you know, it's going to take some time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your energy and excitement on this too.
Thank you. Our next item, item number 10.
Item 10, action item, approval of 2019 Economic Development Strategic Business Plan and Budget.
Good evening. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to those of you who took us up on the offer to meet and do a deep dive on this budget and provide feedback. We have taken that feedback into account, and it is reflected in the proposed budget before you. I'm going to walk through the first portion of this budget and then pass it over to Natalie, our Senior VP of Finance, to cover the rest. And then our whole team is here for questions, as I mentioned earlier. Because we are sensitive to covering all the details, I'll be reading a little more than normal, which is outside of our regular style, so please excuse that. But I'll remind you that in September, we presented a draft presentation. We had those individual feedback meetings. We've also had lots of meetings with the board members that are members of the Go Topeka board and have a final budget before you this evening. Okay, so let's just kick it off and start to talk line by line. Start with revenue. Obviously, $5 million sales tax revenue, we know where that comes from. Other income, the items that make up that line item are things like revenue that we get from the crops at the commerce parks, investment income, and then ticket sales and sponsorships from any events that are put on with public dollars. Remember that in this budget, we are focusing JEDO expenditures on new business attraction, business retention and expansion, minority and women business development, entrepreneurship, and workforce and education. So onto the department.
Molly, if we could, can we take a brief recess for technical difficulties in the control room? Let's take a 5-minute recess. A motion made by Commissioner Cook.
Second.
second by Commissioner Bueller. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? We are in a 5-minute recess. Let's go, Molly. Let's see where we were at.
Okay. I believe I know where I was, so I'll kind of start over with everybody. Is everybody back? Okay. So remember, within the JEDO public budget, we are focusing these expenditures on new business attraction, business retention and expansion, minority and women business development, entrepreneurship, workforce, and education. So we'll start off with the first line item in the departmental section, EMBD. Not much change in this line item as far as costs go. Some major components of this line are an incubator for the Topeka Housing Authority, a commercial kitchen, increased marketing of the resources available to the community within Go Topeka. Next line item is new business attraction. We continue to focus on awareness of the business assets in Topeka and Shawnee County and building relationships. Leveraging partnerships with the state and other regional economic development partners will also continue to be a focus in 2019. We also plan to bring more site selectors to our community to showcase our business assets and build stronger connections with potential growth opportunities. Business retention and expansion. The increase you see in this line correlates with a decrease in the G&A section below in the accounting and auditing line. We have moved the costs associated with auditing incentive agreements to this line as it's a function of this department. We will also have some headquarters visits planned for 2019, as well as a more robust business visitation program that includes more than just one point person in BRE. We're going to share that effort as a team. The research line. This line item has seen a decrease due to having Freddie on our staff and utilizing his talents instead of some of the third-party services that we've utilized in the past. Workforce and education. This line item houses the workforce development activities as well as the Cradle Through Career initiatives that Diane is launching with Together Topeka. So there's an added initiative in this line item, as well as a talent attraction marketing campaign and additional JEDO scholarships for Washburn Tech East to mirror the established program that exists at Washburn Tech on Huntoon. The last department in this section is entrepreneurial development. This line has seen an increase due to moving 712 Innovations up from the special initiatives section below where it has been housed in the past. So if you'll notice, the last line on the budget is at a 0 for 2019, and it was at $100,000 for 2018. We also continue to support the Washburn University Pitch Competition, and you will hear lots more about new initiatives to capitalize on our location within the animal health corridor and the innovation opportunities that we are leveraging. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to pass it over to Natalie, and she will go through the rest of the budget, and then we will both stand for questions. And obviously, if there's detailed questions that require other staff members, we'll call them to the stand.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I've met most of you. My name's Natalie Zeller. I am the CFO for Go Topeka, and I came before you in October to present parts of the draft budget. Sorry. Let me tell you, the second time at the podium is not any less intimidating, so bear with me here. Thank you. As Molly mentioned, we had a lot of you take us up on the one-on-one meetings, and I want to express my gratitude for that as well. All of you had great feedback, both on the budget and the process as well. So I plan to take that feedback back, and I want to improve the process year over year to make this a smooth and transparent process for everybody. So let's jump back into the numbers. So I will be covering the G&A section next. So on personnel's up slightly over last year. In this line, we have budgeted a total of 4.2 FTEs, which is compared to 3.9 FTEs in 2018. I just want to point out that even though we do have two new initiatives in our program budget, that being the entrepreneur development and the Cradle Through Career, Go Topeka Public's FTEs remain consistent with last year. This is because both of those new initiatives are supported with private funding for their personnel. In this line, we also have a 10% increase in benefits effective July 1. The marketing, communications, and events line. Within this line are the marketing, communications, and events services that support all of the programs and initiatives that Molly addressed above. The finance and admin line, you'll notice an increase over last year due to our building our internal finance and HR departments to reduce reliance on external services. So with the amount of dollars we are responsible for, it's important to myself and Go Topeka that we are able to properly account for and report timely information to, so that you can make the proper decisions for the community going forward. In the occupancy line, there is a substantial decrease over last year due to having higher than normal budgeted costs for the 2018 office move, as well as we're seeing cost savings as we're realizing the result of economies of scale as we grow. Insurance and tax line decreased slightly over last year. We shifted property tax expense from this line down to the land held for investment, down to the existing site and land expenditures line we'll discuss below. Insurance and taxes, this line decreased slightly as well due to shifting, oh sorry, I just went over that line. Accounting and auditing, substantial decrease over last year due partly to shifting the audit fees and incentives up to the business retention and expansion line that Molly just discussed, as well as we're seeing overall expense reductions for external services. So as I mentioned above, the strategy to bring our finance and HR services internal will continue to drop the cost spent on external services in this line, and this is where you'll see these savings. So the general office, again, is another area where we're seeing cost savings as a result of economies of scale as we continue to do more with the same or less costs. So overall, total G&A is budgeted at $940,000 and total operating is budgeted at $2.35 million. This $2.35 million represents only 14% of the total collection of all sales tax dollars for economic development, based on numbers produced from the JEDO budget in the JEDO audit report from 2017. Total operating expenditures are $140,000 higher than last year, which is entirely a result of higher program expenses, as G&A expenses are budgeted at a slight decrease. Remember, we discussed the $100,000 of increase in program expense related to shifting 712 funding from the incentives and initiatives section below up to the entrepreneur development line. I believe overall this is a modest increase for a budget where we are implementing 2 new initiatives. So moving down to the next section of the income statement, we have the incentives, expenditures, initiatives, and other section. So because we have some large expenditures in this section, I've broken the numbers up into 2 columns to better depict the expenditures that are coming from the 2019 operating budget and those expenditures that we're projecting to spend in 2019 that have previously been approved by this committee to be spent from carry forward dollars. When we get to the carry forward discussion, you'll notice some overlap between this middle column and the carry forward breakdown. The anticipated expenditures are business incentives that are committed but still to be earned and paid out. The $772,000 in the operating column represents the amount of incentives projected to be earned in 2019, and the $1.46 million in the middle column represents those expenditures that were committed in prior years but have yet to be earned and paid out. Existing site and land expenditures are up slightly. Here's where you see the increase from shifting the property taxes that we discussed above. In workforce initiatives, the operating budget for 2019 includes both Phase 2 for SOTO and Phase 1 for NETO. The carry forward column represents the remaining funds from broadband, which was pointed out earlier this evening. The small business incentive line is up $60,000 over last year. Due to its popularity and success, we wanted to increase the funding for this. The quality of place funding is the $2 million that we discussed earlier. Washburn Tech East includes the subsidy payments for Washburn as well as interest expense on the debt assumed through the New Markets tax credit process. And then 49th Street is carrying over into the 2019 budget due to timing of city assessments. You'll then notice that the 712 line is blank. This is where you see the other side of that entrepreneurial development shift. So for 2019, we're projecting to add to the carryover for 1.25 million from the operating budget. However, in the middle column, we're projecting a use of carryover 5.5 million for all of the special projects listed above. That's all I had, so with that, we can stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Natalie on her presentation?
Thank you. The new incentives, $250,000, would you outline those a little bit?
Those are incentives that we keep as a placeholder for if we need to do something in the year instead, because normally our incentives come through and come to this body, but we use them as a placeholder for incentives for new businesses within that year that may come through, and it's the same that we have in the budget every year.
You said there's nothing specific at this point?
No.
Okay,
nothing
thank you.
specific.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions for Natalie on this budgetary presentation or for Molly? Deputy Mayor Jensen. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much. Molly?
Okay, let's keep rolling, talking about numbers. So the cash carry forward, in your packet, you have the cash carry forward agreement. This is,
I think the cash carry forward is our next item.
Oh,
So
shoot.
you're not there yet. I know, we're excited.
I'm trying to keep it moving.
I appreciate
I did.
All right, so before we take any action on item number 10, there are people that have signed up to speak on this item. The first public comment is Bryce Lightke. I'm sorry. Lipke, thank you. And then also with him is Nicole Bloomquist.
Hi, my name is Nicole Bloomquist. This is Bryce Lipke. We're both students at Shawnee Heights High School. With us today in the audience, we also have McKenna Orton, Leo Espinoza, and Veronica Lysett. We are coming to you today to increase awareness and gain support for an up-and-coming youth commission. We'd also like to acknowledge Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Bueller, Councilmember Mike Padilla, Mayor De La Isla, Matt Pavarnik, and Caleb Bittler, who have all been a part of this process so far. So we're representing the Greater Topeka Partnership Youth Commission, and our goal is to create a commission housed under the Greater Topeka Partnership to engage youth in a partnership to transform our community for the greater good of all, which is outlined on the handouts that are being passed out right now. So we are going to advocate for what's important to us, and to do this, we're going to branch out into 3 specific categories, which are on that little picture on the top right corner. So first, we're going to work with the local government, such as having a mayor's council and also serving on government boards. Secondly, we're going to outreach to create events for youth and work with Washburn University to have training sessions for the youth. And thirdly, we'll be involved in the community through working with nonprofits, volunteering, and partnering with businesses.
So currently we are working with the Greater Topeka Partnership and Momentum 2022 because a lot of the things that we are aiming to do parallels goals outlined in Momentum 2022. We see this community-wide partnership as an essential part of the future growth and development of our community. This commission has the capacity to have significant part in the community's economic development. It would also have benefiting factors to the workforce development, such as mentorship between youth and adults. This would be a two-way mentorship that would allow for both meaningful relationships with adults and youth. Also, getting connected in the fields for future occupations is something that is important for students, and that would be allowed through this process. Students could get involved and make meaningful relationships with people that they are planning to go into that field with. And also, it will help with population retention. We're going to give youth a voice, and having them feel that they are being heard and getting them more connected in the community, they will be more likely to stay. Some other benefits that this commission would include would be increased insight for community initiatives. So students and youth would be able to provided opportunities to give opinions on things that are happening in Topeka, and adults would also gain a broader perspective of insight.
Another benefit would be improving policies and programs for youth. So if anything's already in place, we can either go to the organization or they can come to us for a two-way communication so that we can provide feedback and hopefully improve what's already happening in Topeka so that we can just get the youth on board and the youth voice heard.
Another benefit it would make our city and county a more youth-friendly community, so youth would have a voice and be more heard, and again, keeping them here.
We're also planning to solidify our partnerships that we already have with Washburn University, the Greater Topeka Partnership, the county, and the city, and we're hoping to build more partnerships so that a lot of people in Topeka can feel like they have a foot in the door in this process and they're all a part of it and everyone feels included.
It would also allow for employer engagement, so employers who are looking for youth or up-and-coming youth for their companies would be able to reach out and gain insight on youth that are available and wanting to go into those occupations. We look forward to keeping you all updated in our progress, and we are happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you very much for coming and speaking with us tonight, making sure that we're aware of everything that is going on with the Youth Commission and its formation and its affiliation with Greater Topeka Partnership. I'm very excited to have you be part of this and what it adds to our community as we do work with workforce development, mentorship, and also with keeping young people in our community. But Mayor Della Isla.
I just have a quick comment. First of all, you guys rocked it. You're speaking in front of the governing body, both governing bodies, and you just made me super proud. I feel like a proud mama, which is like making me feel like super old. But the bigger message is, hey, Topeka, did you see that? This is your youth. Shawnee County, this is your youth. Our future is very bright.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yes.
If I could add one comment. I'm very excited about this, guys. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Please, please, please don't be afraid to reach out to us and tell us what you want. We can't make decisions on your behalf in detail unless we know exactly what you want and how you want it done. So please tell us these things. It's incredibly important as we try to sort out building the community to know your thoughts and your feelings. So if I can help you guys in any way, please let me know. But good luck. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.
Thank you.
Councilmember Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like the mayor said, I'm very glad to see you guys here tonight. We've sat and visited, and Commissioner Cook has been in on a lot of those meetings as well. And what I like is that I know for sure, but I don't think any of us had anything to do with your presentation. So I'm impressed with what you put together and brought before this body. And I hope to see it get bigger and bigger, and I hope to see more inclusion. And I know that you're working on that. We've talked about that. But I'm very excited for the start and looking forward to the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hiller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm out of the loop on this a little bit, so I too was very impressed with your presentation. I'm really impressed down here where it talks about the membership being inclusive and broad-based. This might sound like a stupid question, but does your organization already exist, and could you talk a little bit about the involvement already?
So we are not currently existing yet. We're still in kind of the process of getting. We think we want to have this start running when we have about 20 members. We're planning on starting the application process hopefully by the end of this year. That way it'll allow students to enroll over the break, and that's our goal at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Della Isla.
And Councilmember Hiller, to add a little bit more to the council that they would have, during our strategic planning session earlier this year, the council said that we would really want to have a partnership with young people in our community and have a representative from each district partner with each council member so that the council member would have a youth member of the community to partner with you. This group is going to be instrumental in assisting us in making that happen.
Thank you.
I might just add and give a shout out to Melissa Masoner. She would be so proud of you both, and I know she's not here tonight. She's probably watching, but just thank you. Keep up the great work, and I know she would be really, really proud. So, congrats.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jeff Russell. Jeff's still here? Yep, yes. There he is. Behind the podium, I couldn't see you.
Good evening to you all. I'm probably not going to be as impressive as those kids are. You guys got me following the kids. That's not right. So many of you I know personally, but thank you so much for allowing me to come speak. I'm from Reesers. I'm a VP of Operation at Reesers. Most of you know that. And if you haven't been by to see our new plan, we just had a great summer with it, and we just really appreciate the support. And true to our word, I want you all to know that effective the first week in October, we did break ground in the remodel of our old salad plant. The family authorized about $40 million to rehab that building, and so we hope to have it up and operational by August of next year to cover our fall season. So thank you so much for the support that you've provided us in the past. And I'm here today to talk about our NITO rideshare program. It's been very successful in the south part of the county, and I don't know whether you all know this or now, we're up to about 1,375 employees right now, and we have a 24-hour-a-day operation, frequently 7 days a week, seasonally. We have people that are reporting to work well after public transportation is available. We have shifts that start at 10, 11, and midnight, and end at 10, 11, and midnight, and we just don't match up very well with some of the public transportation availability to us. Currently, we have about 150 positions open on those shifts, and our primary problem with those shifts is many of our employees do not own vehicles, and they rely on public transportation. And we need this. We've seen how successful this has been in South Topeka, and we've been very patient as we built our new building and kind of got our hands around that and waiting to see how that went, and it looks like it's really working well, and so we too would like to get involved in that. It'll help us get our second shift to staff, get them home, get our third shift into work. We're very concerned about our employees that walk in East Topeka. We do have a number of employees that walk to and from work, and walking in East Topeka at that time of night, it's not a great deal. We have a number of employees that work on the north side of the river. Very difficult for those folks to get to work. We believe that we can attract a much larger pool of people if we're able to access some ride help overnight. Second and third shifts have always in manufacturing been difficult to fill, and we're no exception there. So we really need a resolution like this. What do you guys call it? NITO, is that right?
Yeah.
NITO. I get NOTO and NITO mixed up. We really need this as an assist to us for us to be able to access these employees, and it would really be, I think, a boom to the county. It will help us drive additional employment and help us include more people into our work group. So. If you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer, but that's about all I have to say. We would really like your support on that piece of the funding. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Russell? Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Belinda Roberts.
I'm going to defer my time. I don't want to follow Jeff.
That would then take us to Lenora Kinsey.
Pardon me?
No.
I guess I could say thanks. Good evening. My name is Lenora Kinsey. I'm a member of Most Pure Heart of Mary Catholic Church and a member of Topeka Jump. Topeka Jump has been actively engaged in new developments in transportation over the past 2 years. We are doing this work because thousands of people do not have a way to get to work. If you don't have a car in Topeka, life is difficult. Getting to work is difficult. Hurdles are higher today as most of us do not live next door to our places of work or within walking distance. There are many major employers outside the city limits providing living wage jobs, and many of these jobs do not require a college degree. Topeka and Shawnee County benefit from these major employers like Mars, Frito-Lay, Target, Goodyear, Reesers, and so many other companies in our community. They provide opportunities for good jobs. Holistic economic development means better paying jobs along with the ability to access those jobs. People in Topeka need alternatives to cars, alternatives that can reach places of employment in our city and county, and not just Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Transportation barriers lock people into poverty. Transportation barriers hinder our economic development as well as industry and population growth. In order for Topeka and Shawnee County to grow, people need reliable transportation to work. We have heard the proposed Phase 2 of the SOTO program and the launching of the new pilot, NEDO. We members of Topeka Jump stand firmly behind both these programs. They fill a transportation gap for the people in Topeka and Shawnee County. and they create a labor solution for employers. Holistic economic development means access to quality jobs, and that access is exactly what SODO and NEDO will provide. Topeka Jump urges you to vote yes on both these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the governing body, that brings us back then to this item on the budget for 2019. Are there any additional questions regarding the budget for 2019?
I'll move approval.
Second.
There's been a motion made by Commissioner Bueller, second by Deputy Mayor Jensen. You got to get back up on your game, Mayor, if you want a second. Call for roll call vote.
Commissioner Bueller?
Aye.
Commissioner Cook?
Aye.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Aye.
Councilmember Padilla?
Aye.
Councilmember Lesser?
Aye.
Passes. That then takes us to item number 11.
Item 11, action item, approval of 2019 cash carry forward agreement.
Okay, let's try this again. Now it's my turn. Okay, so you have before you in your packet the cash carry forward agreement, and that is the legal document that allows us to carry forward unspent funds, and that's what you will be voting on this evening. So, Commissioner Cook, I'm not sure how you'd like to tackle this, but we have that as the action item, and then I would also like to, for illustration purposes only, walk through the committed and planned expenses that impact the carry forward so that you can understand what is left from that 19.2 to be determined to be spent on other initiatives.
Why don't we go ahead and walk through that amount first, and then we can take up action on it. I think that would help illustrate that 19 million, because it's a very large amount.
Sure.
With that explanation.
A couple of years ago, we started this process of walking through the breakdown of items that impact the carry forward to explain what's restricted, approved, or planned to be spent from the 19 million that you see before you. So please understand this breakdown, again, is for illustration purposes and helps bring to light what is committed and planned and how much is left for this board to strategize how to best invest in economic development priorities to project our community forward. Again, bear with me as I'm going to walk through each line. So the first line here we have is the EMBD carryover. Per JEDO, 10% of the sales tax dollars for economic development are to be reserved for minority and disadvantaged business support. The underspend of that built up over the years is a little over $1 million and remains restricted to be spent only on expenses that meet that criteria. Next we have the Consa Fire, Commerce Park, and Firehouse. Per the MARS contract, we are to reserve a portion of the property tax abatement funds for possible sustainability upgrades or fire protection assets at Consa Fire Commerce Park. Currently, that is at $400,000 and will continue to accrue as MARS continues to pay their property taxes. The next line is the total incentives currently committed but not yet earned. We are bound by contract to pay these out, and as companies perform by adding jobs and investment. So as you walk through, you will be able to follow along with some of these items, and I'll point them out as we get to them. But that extra column that Natalie referenced earlier in the budget will line up with these items as well. Next, we have the remainder of the prior approved expenses related to the broadband initiative at $39,000, and these numbers are rounded. Next line item is quality of place at $2 million. We developed this slide before we came to the meeting tonight in hopes that this would pass, but would be able to do some quick math at the end if that were to be adjusted. Next line item, the East Topeka Learning Center project. It's broken into a couple of different pieces. The first line represents the 2019 costs related to the interest and partnership funds with Washburn University. The next line represents the remaining construction costs for capitalized assets regarding the Washburn Tech East program or project. And again, we continue to have the 49th Street improvement costs in the breakdown until the city does assessments for the project later on in 2019. The next section contains projected expenses for 2020 and beyond. So again, we have committed incentives. And then the East Topeka Learning Center partnership funds and interest for the remainder of the project. The last item is a suggested reserve for an economic development deal closing fund. As a best practice, we want to ensure we still have the funds needed for incentivizing new jobs and investment in Topeka and Shawnee County. This is something we discussed in the breakdown last year as well. So that leaves about $2 million left to be used for future investment in economic development initiatives that are yet to be determined. That's really a JEDO conversation, but the board is holding the retreat on January 7th to address some of the items that have been circulating in the community. Also keep in mind, as Matt mentioned earlier, 10 years from now, that $5 million that's allocated to Go Topeka for economic development will not be worth what $5 million is today. So having some reserves will help guard against that. So now that we have been here for 3.5 hours, if you have any questions, I will entertain them. I'm sure your brain is a little fogged over by now, so I'd be happy to answer anything.
Questions for Molly regarding this cash carry forward amounts? Commissioner Archer.
Yeah, the $2 million, is that what we approved tonight?
Yes, that is the 2018 Quality of Place project that you approved earlier this evening.
Okay, so it looks like we're really $7 million more than what's contractually committed at this point.
So the items that are, all the items that are in this carry forward breakdown are either approved to be spent specifically from the carry forward dollars, or the one item of the Economic Development Incentive Fund, the $5 million, is a placeholder and hasn't been acted on by any means. It's just a best practice that we are suggesting. But the rest of the items here have been either called out to be spent from carry forward, not from operation budgets, but specifically from carry forward.
But for the purposes of the 5 million plus the 2,008,000.
Oh, sure,
That would be
yeah.
seven.
I wasn't connecting that you were adding those two items. Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
so that's
Yeah.
$7 million that's not committed.
Yes, not committed, yes.
I don't know if it bothers anybody else, but $19 million of carryover gives me a lot of heartburn. It says it's just a lot of money to be carrying over. I'm wondering if some of that money could be rebated to the city and county. I mean, you're talking about money that's just sitting there not doing anything, and we've got real needs in the city and county to improve our community today with some funds.
So some of the
And the thing that it worries me is that ways to spend taxpayer money expand as the amount of money available is there. If you get my drift, I'm wondering if there's some way to rebate some money to the city and county. I just think $19 million is a lot of money to carry over. And I have some heartburn with it.
You want to go
Sure.
ahead? Okay.
So I'll tell you about a recurring dream I have. The recurring dream I have is, well, a lot of us went to Chattanooga recently, and we heard from Volkswagen. I have nightmares that one of these days Volkswagen's going to call us, and we're going to say, guess what? We spent all of our economic development money on other things. Sorry, Volkswagen, we can't help you. And so I think that right now, for us to recommend, and really I look at both governing bodies, and I know that both governing bodies within the community also find it to be a best practice to have reserves so that we have money to work on things like this. I also have dreams sometimes of what if we get hit by a tornado? You know, what if a natural disaster comes through here? Then the definition of economic development changes. And I would sure hate to look to our taxpayers at that time and say, guess what? We spent all our money. So I would say that having dollars, emptying our cupboards completely and not having economic development dollars in reserves is something that I wouldn't recommend. And I wouldn't recommend it for the city, the county, or for our economic development organization.
But you can understand my concern.
I can understand your concern.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I've been a voting member before, and I always opposed the cash carry forward. And I did a little research this week, anticipating this meeting, and then 2013, it was $7 million of carryover funds. 2014, it was $9 million, and it seems to have grown almost $2 million ever since. And, you know, if we always need this extra little bit of cash on hand, we're still not using it. And, you know, the woulda, coulda, shouldas, or I don't know, what was that, a Volkswagen or something like that. You know, I think if something like that came and the money wasn't there, you come to JEDO and we'll make something happen. But my first vote was for $11.6 million cash carry forward. I voted against that. 15 million the next year, 17.5 million the next year. I don't think this is what the voters were wanting when they were talking about doing economic development. I think it needs to be active in the community, and I say that every year. So, thanks for listening.
And I think that one of the, maybe we're getting stuck on is the top number, that 19,200,000, down to the last two numbers. Outside of the last two numbers, all the rest of those dollars are committed dollars that we've already made commitments to. We're carrying them forward because the project is not yet complete. For example, the quality of place that we voted on to this evening, East Topeka Learning Center, 49th Street, committed incentives to companies in the community for job incentives. Those are just not complete. So the amount that we're really carrying forward, I mean, if you really were to break this down to the brass tacks, we are carrying forward 7 million or 8,000. That's the uncommitted part, where of that, 5 million is for a reserve, and so really 2 million is the uncommitted portion. And I think it would behoove this body to talk about that $2 million, and if we are not having a commitment for it, where would it be best committed for either those four legs, but the three primary legs of economic development? But I agree with you.
I just wanted to point out the fact of how much this has grown over the years, with the promise of that we do need to have this because we're going to spend it. Well, we're not spending it. And I sure can think of a lot of projects that the city could do, and maybe the county has some projects that you guys would like to do. And, you know, with that money there, it's something at least worth looking at. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Can I mention one thing? We're under non-disclosure agreements on a lot of the things that we're working on. And so I will tell you right now, we have some projects in our pipeline that if we didn't have this money, we would have to call and tell some of these projects, sorry, take us off the list right now. So, you know, again, we're under non-disclosure agreements, so we can't talk to you about that. But there are some things we're working on right now that if we get good news, we would need some of these dollars, actually quite a bit of them, to create jobs, to create capital investment and to create jobs. So, again, kind of going back to, I think my financial advisor encourages me to save for the future. The net present value of these dollars in 10 years are going to be less than they are now, and so it would scare me to not have these dollars available for future job creation.
Deputy Mayor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to ask why we consider encumbered funds carryover. To me, that's not carry forward money, because that's not money we have to spend. It's already spent. It hasn't been earned yet, but we don't have the vast majority of that available to play with. We only have $7 million of the 19 that we could even use now. In government, $7 million doesn't buy a lot. That's 7 miles of road, if that. So I couldn't support pulling it out and deploying it any place else other than with economic development where it's at now. At some point, we're going to ask for some resources for digital inclusion, training and education, and some sort of incentive to help with broadband in the rural parts of Shawnee County. We're not prepared to give you a number. We're not prepared to make an ask yet because we're not at that point. But as I mentioned earlier, there are two phases or two parts of that project that are incredibly important to a lot of this. And as far as we know at this point, we will have to come back and ask. So keep that in mind. That would have to come out of that $2 million, essentially. I wholeheartedly agree that there are a lot of things in economic development that we're not privy to, that we're not allowed to know just because that's the nature of the beast. And if our team is telling us they need that money, I have a real hard problem not believing them given their track record, and we don't want to blow some of these opportunities, folks, because it may be the only chance we ever get to land that. That was the deal with Mars, and look how successful we are with that. So.
I'll also add that we don't have included in this breakdown the $1.4 million that you approved for Project Purple earlier this evening either. So that's not included in this.
Councilmember Lester.
And correct me if I'm wrong too, but doesn't it also, as this program continues to be successful, doesn't it also make sense to a certain extent, since many of these funds are encumbered but yet not spent, that doesn't it make sense that that number would continue to grow as we continue to add projects to it? I mean, to me, that just makes sense. Now, the only question I do have is on the reserve of the $5 million, do we have that, where is that sitting at from an investment standpoint? Because when I look at, I see our sales tax receipt income, then I look at our other income, which is $189,900, which gives me those different things. But if we have, let me ask that question first.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that $5 million sitting?
I might need to get the
at?
accountant to come up and maybe give us some information on that.
Are you asking physical placement of the cash?
Yeah, basically, what type of account do we have that in?
We do have some CD investments. Some of our funds do sit in CD investments, and the rest do sit in interest-bearing accounts, savings accounts.
That would probably be the only thing I have a question about, just looking at a small fraction return on $5 million. That might be something that we want to look. I mean, 3% investment return is $350,000. I mean, so just out of curiosity, if it was my $5 million, I would want more than that. So, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Jensen.
If I could ask a question. So we have, I don't know that we've placed limits, or maybe you all have internal limits on the aggressiveness at which that reserved money, I say reserved money, can be invested. Are those things that if we change the requirements, you could be more aggressive with some of those investments for the reserves that I don't want to use the term just sitting in account, but, or is I realize interest rates are very, very low, and if that's the best we can do, that's the best we can do, but I don't want us to be the barrier for getting the maximum return of the cash we have in accounts.
Don't know that we have any guidelines in place from this body at this point in time. It may be something to explore, so that we
Okay.
do have a guideline for how aggressive we do want to be with those
I don't
funds.
necessarily know the guidelines, but certainly we don't want any barriers.
Sure.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Chair. I've been through the conversation before about the spend down issue, and I would want to take the time to reverse that and make the point again that I know that staff has responded before. One of the reasons we have that money is that our staff has been very careful not to spend money just for the sake of spending it. And I heartily support that, and I don't want this body to ever find itself even saying, we want you to just go spend the money. And in fact, I didn't get a chance to make comments on the item before, but the detail on the program overview is really, to me, the meat and potatoes. We're supposed to be funding a budget, but also priorities every year in December. And there's a lot of material in here. I am one of the people that met with staff, and a number of the programs, we're really in a transition time, and they are unfolding now, even into 2019. And Molly or somebody mentioned, maybe Natalie, that there's actually private money that we don't see in here that is supplementing the JEDO money we have. And I think the staff needs to tell us more about that. I'm really proud of that, and I want to be able to identify what those private dollars have done and celebrate them as our years progress as well. So accumulating some money because we've been judicious about how we spend it, I think is okay. I also think it's okay at a certain point to say, well, like the quality of place, to say, that's really important to attracting and keeping people. We do think it fits within that definition of jobs. And so periodically talking about it, but not as a way to constructively continue investing, but certainly I'm proud of the fact that the staff has been judicious and that there's some left. Thank you.
Any other comments this evening? Motion on the item. Before we take any vote, there are 2 public comments signed up. The first is Keith Warda.
I would ask that you consider just 3 quick points. Number 1, if you look at the expenditures for 2019, that amounts to about $8 million. I think we're going to look at year-on-year decrease in the carry forward just because of that point alone. Secondly, I think the $5 million we have to trust in the professionals as far as the amount that we need to keep in reserve, and I think that's what Molly and Matt are recommending. Third point, relative to the $2 million, that needs to stay dedicated to something that has to do with economic development. That's the commitment. I mean, this all flowed down from the $5 million commitment to economic development. I think it needs to stay directed at economic development in one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carol Marble.
I agree with having a reserve. I guess my question, we spent so much time discussing quality of place, and you approved $2 million to a few organizations. Are you going to continue with that, or was this a one-time thing, or, I guess I'd like to know where the intent is to go with quality of place. Thank you.
I might just note, anticipating that question, there is not an item in the budget that we approved for quality of place for the year 2019. I think that in the past, what we looked at was the carry forward funds and using some of those carry forward funds, but there's not any in 2019. If there was in the future, we would have to take this up as a body to do so. The motion made by Deputy Mayor Jensen, second by Councilmember Lesser. Is there any other comment? Seeing Commissioner Archer.
Yeah, I just keep this up a little bit longer. I'm going to support this, but I hope and pray it does go to job incentives and not monkey bars down in the city of Auburn. Thank you.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Bueller? Aye. Commissioner Cook?
Aye.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Aye.
Councilmember Padilla?
Aye.
Councilmember Lesser?
Aye.
Passes. Brings us to item number 12. There is no other business before the body unless there is proposed by the members. All right. That leads us to public comment. Carol Marple, you are the lone public comment, so you have the final word.
I'm not even going to respond to the monkey bars down in Auburn because I think that was completely uncalled for. I don't take it as a joke. Okay. I am going to make another comment about the quality of life program since I do have your attention for 4 minutes. I don't think I explained myself very well. I don't live in Auburn. I live on Wanamaker Road. I consider Auburn to be my town because that is where I am closest to. That is where I go to use the monkey bars. Will go to. I also would like to say I'm going to use Commissioner Bueller's number, that there are 45,000 people in the unincorporated areas. We all pay taxes. Yet of that $2 million, we only got $53,000 for monkey bars. That's not being equal. Thank you, Councilman Padilla, for saying that. All we're asking in the county is for a fair share. And believe me, folks, we are not getting it. Thank you.
Thank you. I would note that we do have meetings scheduled for 2019. They are scheduled on Wednesdays, on February the 13th, May 8th, September 11th, and December 11th of 2019. And also noting that the chairship will change beginning in February with Mayor Della Isla and any other voting members that would change with the city. Mayor?
Commissioner, if I may have just a minute to just say thank you to Commissioner Bueller for her service to our community. She has been, whether she knows it or not, a person that I've looked up to for a long time. I've always appreciated her demeanor and the respect in which she manages herself. She is a great role model for women out there who are looking to get involved in our community. Phenomenal mother, phenomenal wife, and she will continue to serve our community as she works with Shaping Minds in Hayden. So I just want to say thank you in this last JEDO meeting that you're going to be with us.
Thank you. I just want to say, this is a true partnership, and between Go Topeka and the city and the county, and I look forward to these meetings, but I have looked forward to my last one. I wish future Commissioner Rippon all the best. I know this community is in good hands, but my last meeting is much different than my first meeting. We have come a long way, and you all have done a huge amount of work, all the volunteers on all the boards, all the staff. We're making great progress, but continue. So, thank you.
There is no other item coming before the board. We are adjourned.